Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. How many times have you asked yourself, why does this keep happening to me? The truth is, your shadow knows. The parts of you you've ignored, buried, denied, they're running the show. And Carl Jung knew this better than anyone. In the next 3 hours, you won't just hear psychology. You'll hear revelations. Jung's words cut through illusion, awaken forgotten truths, and teach you how to live a life of meaning, not just maintenance. If you've ever felt like you're living someone else's story, this is your chance to reclaim your own. If this is your first time on our channel, hit subscribe and comment which philosopher you'd like to discover in our next video. What you resist in yourself will dominate you from the shadows. It's not just a poetic idea, it's a psychological law. When you deny, suppress, or repress aspects of yourself that you consider unworthy, dangerous, or shameful, they don't disappear. They simply move underground. And from there, they influence your thoughts, your behavior, your relationships, and your destiny without your awareness. The parts of you that you push away don't die. They grow teeth. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious repository of all the traits, impulses, and instincts that your conscious ego refuses to accept. You were trained, often from childhood, to suppress parts of yourself in order to fit in, to be good, to be loved. You were taught that anger is wrong, desire is shameful, selfishness is evil, fear is weakness. So you buried them. But the psyche has no interest in erasing itself to meet social standards. The psyche wants wholeness. And wholeness requires facing what you've tried to forget. When you refuse to look at your shadow, it doesn't just sit quietly in the dark. It acts. It reacts. It manipulates. It sabotages. It appears in your judgment of others, your uncontrollable emotional reactions, your recurring patterns of conflict. That explosive anger that surprises you, that unshakable jealousy, that harsh voice that criticizes your every move, these aren't coming from nowhere. They are the shadow trying to be heard. The shadow doesn't only consist of negative traits. Often it contains powerful instincts and capacities that you've disowned. Maybe you were told you were too much as a child, so you learned to be quiet, small, polite. Your assertiveness went into the shadow. Maybe you were shamed for showing emotion, so you became numb. Your sensitivity and compassion buried beneath a shell of control. The result is a life that feels safe but stifled, controlled but empty. Resisting the shadow creates internal war, and in every war, someone loses. If your ego wins, your soul is silenced. If your shadow wins, your life spirals into chaos. But when you stop resisting, when you begin the courageous work of turning toward what you fear, you shift the balance. The shadow, once integrated, becomes your ally. Your anger becomes boundaries. Your fear becomes alertness. Your ambition becomes drive instead of destruction. You begin to reclaim the energy that was once wasted on repression and redirection. This isn't about indulging every dark impulse. It's about acknowledgement, understanding, and transformation. When you sit with your shadow, not to banish it, but to learn from it, you discover that even the ugliest emotions carry messages. Rage may reveal a boundary that's been crossed. Envy may point to unlived potential. Sadness may be mourning a life that never had a chance to bloom. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The work is not glamorous, it's not easy, but it is liberating. Every part of you that you face becomes a part you no longer fear. And when you are no longer afraid of yourself, nothing in the world can control you from the outside, because you are no longer being controlled from within. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become. This is more than a comforting phrase. It is a psychological truth, a spiritual challenge, and a call to radical ownership of your identity. Yes, your past shaped you, but it does not define you unless you allow it to. What happened to you is a story. Who you become is a decision. Trauma, heartbreak, betrayal, neglect, these are real. They leave marks. They shape your nervous system, your beliefs, your reactions. But they do not have the final word. You may not have chosen your pain, but you get to choose your response. And in that response lies your power. Carl Jung understood that people are not just the sum of their experiences. We are also the sum of our potential, the latent parts of us waiting to be awakened, lived, and expressed. The psyche doesn't just carry memory, it carries direction. The danger comes when you confuse your history with your identity. You begin to speak in the language of permanence. I am broken. I am unlovable. I am not enough. But those are not truths. They are conclusions drawn in a moment of pain and rehearsed until they became familiar. What you believe about yourself is not always evidence. It's often just repetition. Jung emphasized that the unconscious mind holds immense power over us when left unexplored, and one of the greatest unconscious forces is identification with the wound. But healing begins the moment you realize your wound is not your worth. Your scars are not your soul. Life will mark you, but it doesn't get to make your choices for you. You do. You choose whether to stay in the story of survival or step into the story of creation. Becoming is not passive. It's an act of rebellion against the version of you that the past tried to freeze in place. You are not your parents' mistakes. You are not your ex's cruelty. You are not the job you lost, the love you didn't receive, the opportunity you missed. Those things may have hurt, but they are not you. They are chapters, not your title, and the future is still unwritten. To become who you want to be, you must first unlearn who you were told you are. That is the task of the inner life, to question the inherited scripts, the automatic identities, the expectations that wrapped around you before you had the chance to speak for yourself. You must turn inward and ask, who am I when I am no longer defined by pain? This work takes courage. It takes grieving the old story. It takes forgiving yourself for the ways you coped. But as you choose, again and again, to step into agency, you reclaim your becoming. You are not a product of what was done to you. You are a sculptor of what you now do with it. Pain may have introduced you to yourself, but your response, your creation, your courage, your character, is what defines you. The past may explain you, but only your choices will define who you become. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. This single line by Carl Jung holds the essence of his entire psychological philosophy. It draws a clear line between illusion and reality, between surface living and soul truth. Most people spend their lives looking outward, chasing success, validation, admiration, and security. But all the while, the truest answers to their deepest questions wait quietly within. To look outside is easy. To look inside is sacred work. The outside world seduces us with distractions. We're conditioned to seek identity in our job titles, our appearance, our bank accounts, our relationships. We're taught to measure our worth by comparison and our progress by applause. This is the realm of dreams, not in the visionary sense, but in the illusory one. When you live only externally, you are asleep to your inner truth. You become a character in a script written by others, playing a part that earns applause but empties your soul. Looking inside, on the other hand, is uncomfortable. It demands silence in a noisy world. It requires you to face your fears, your contradictions, your longings, and your wounds without flinching. But this is where real awakening begins. Jung believed that the unconscious mind, what lies beneath the surface of your conscious awareness, holds not only your pain, but your wholeness. And that to awaken is to become aware of your inner landscape, to listen to your dreams, your emotions, your instincts, your symbols. The inner life is not a fantasy. It is the soil of reality. When you turn inward, you discover patterns that were shaping your life without your consent. You recognize projections, old stories, wounds inherited from family and culture. More importantly, you begin to reclaim what you've abandoned, your desires, your power, your creativity, your soul's voice. Awakening is not a moment. It's a lifelong process of remembering yourself. The world needs more awakened people, not just dreamers, because dreamers chase the light outside of them, while the awakened carry it within. They move from a place of inner clarity. They are not as easily manipulated by fear, guilt, or social expectation. They are harder to control, but easier to trust. They are rooted in something deeper than the latest trend or approval. To awaken is not to escape life. It is to enter it more fully, more consciously. It is to ask, what is truly mine? And have the courage to let go of what isn't. It is to stop outsourcing your truth and begin living from the inside out. It is a return, not to some idealized self, but to your most honest self, the one beneath the masks, beneath the armor, beneath the noise. Dreams may entertain the ego, but awakening feeds the soul. And while it might not be as glamorous, it is infinitely more fulfilling. It is what gives you real peace. Because when you are awake to yourself, you stop being lost in the world. You stop chasing reflections. You realize that everything you've been seeking, freedom, love, meaning, was never out there. It was always waiting for you to come home. Your shadow holds the keys to your authenticity. The very parts of yourself that you've disowned, denied, or buried are not your shame. They are your power. The shadow, as Carl Jung defined it, is the unconscious side of your personality that the ego refuses to identify with. It includes everything you've deemed not me, whether because it was judged, punished, or misunderstood. But here's the paradox. What you hide in the dark is often what makes you real. Most people try to become authentic by polishing their persona. They think authenticity is about being yourself in public, smiling more honestly, speaking more openly, dressing more uniquely. But that's only the surface. Authenticity isn't about curating your identity. It's about recovering it. And that recovery leads straight through the shadow. The shadow contains the traits and impulses you were told were unacceptable: anger, selfishness, arrogance, sexuality, grief, jealousy, ambition, rage. Not because these things are inherently evil, but because they made someone else uncomfortable. Maybe you were told to be nice when you were angry, or that boys don't cry, or that girls should be quiet. You learned to suppress those parts of yourself to survive or gain approval. But repression doesn't erase, it imprisons. The cost of suppression is self-fragmentation. And here's the truth. You cannot be whole without your shadow. You cannot access your authenticity by pretending you're only light. Authenticity requires integration. When you begin to face your shadow, you start to recognize that every disowned trait had a message. Anger can reveal boundaries that were violated. Envy can point to desires you've silenced. Sadness can be a sacred response to what was lost. Even arrogance might be a shield protecting a part of you that was never validated. When you integrate your shadow, something remarkable happens. You stop being split. You stop performing in one room and collapsing in another. You stop policing yourself into perfection. You start speaking with the voice that was buried under years of conditioning. You start acting with clarity instead of compulsion. You begin to feel whole because nothing is left outside of your awareness. This doesn't mean indulging every dark impulse. Integration is not acting out. It's understanding. It's the difference between punching a wall in anger and acknowledging the deeper truth your anger wants you to see. When the shadow is integrated, it becomes a source of strength, creativity, and instinct. You stop being controlled by it because you are in conscious relationship with it. Most people walk through life haunted by their shadow, projecting it onto others, acting it out in their relationships, or being quietly drained by the inner war between who they are and who they think they must be. But the moment you turn toward your shadow, the war begins to end. You reclaim your energy. You retrieve your lost voice. You remember parts of yourself that were never meant to be abandoned. Your shadow is not your enemy. It is your map. It points to the exact places where your true self was hidden. It is the key to becoming not just someone who looks authentic, but someone who is. Dreams are the language of the soul. While most people dismiss them as random images or subconscious leftovers, Carl Jung saw dreams as profound messages from the unconscious, a symbolic dialogue between the deeper self and the waking mind. Dreams are not meaningless. They are a coded form of communication, a nightly letter from the parts of you that your daytime consciousness forgets, ignores, or cannot yet understand. In waking life, we speak in logic, in categories, in expectations, but the soul doesn't speak in those terms. The soul speaks in images, emotions, symbols, and archetypes. That's why dreams rarely make rational sense at first glance. They are not supposed to. They bypass the ego's defenses and communicate truth in metaphor. And the more emotionally charged or bizarre a dream feels, the more urgent its message may be. Dreams reveal what the conscious mind is not yet ready to admit. You may appear calm on the surface, but your dreams could show you drowning, trapped, or chased, an indication that something in your waking life is being suppressed. Or you might dream of a long-forgotten place, a mysterious figure, or an animal you rarely see. These images aren't random. They are symbols representing energies within you. Jung believed these weren't just individual symbols, but archetypes, universal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious that speak to every human soul. Dreams often guide us toward balance. If you're too caught up in achievement and external validation, you might dream of missing a train or forgetting your shoes, symbolizing disconnection from your inner journey. If you ignore your emotions, your dreams might create floods or emotional chaos. If you're on the wrong path, a dream might confront you with images of death, not as punishment, but as invitation. Death in dreams is often symbolic of transformation. Something in you is ending, so something new can be born. Some dreams revisit past events, not to re-traumatize, but to reintegrate. The soul uses dreams to reweave memory, to process old pain that your waking self avoids. Others give glimpses of the future, not as prediction, but as possibility. Jung called these prospective dreams, visions that hint at who you are becoming if you dare to listen. The more you engage with your dreams, the more clearly they speak. When you journal them, reflect on them, or explore them symbolically, you strengthen the bridge between the conscious and unconscious. You start to see that your dreams are not separate from your life. They are mirrors. They show you your wounds, your longings, your potential. They are your soul's attempt to wake you up, gently, creatively, insistently. Many people ask, "What's my purpose?" or "What does my soul want?" The answers often arrive at night, not as commands, but as symbols to be decoded. A locked door, a broken mirror, a child crying in the corner. These are not puzzles, they are invitations. To dismiss your dreams is to ignore your own inner compass. To honor them is to enter a deeper conversation with yourself, one that can lead to healing, clarity, and transformation. Because when the soul speaks, it speaks through dreams. And when you finally learn to listen, you don't just understand your dreams, you begin to understand yourself. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. It sounds simple, But in practice, it is the most difficult, most courageous journey a human being can take, because who you truly are has been buried under expectations, under survival strategies, under layers of persona crafted to please, to protect, to belong. You were not born a stranger to yourself. You became one, and the work of becoming is the work of returning. Carl Jung understood that the self is not a static identity to be discovered once, but a dynamic process to be lived. He called it individuation, the unfolding of the true self over time through conscious integration of the unconscious. This is not a quest for perfection. It's not about polishing your personality or achieving enlightenment. It's about wholeness. Becoming who you truly are means embracing every part of yourself, the light and the shadow, the known and the repressed, the persona and the soul. Most people spend their lives chasing what they think they should be, not listening to who they are. You may adopt roles given to you by family, culture, religion. You may pursue goals that were never yours to begin with. You might suppress your anger to be seen as kind, hide your dreams to seem realistic, or bury your vulnerability to appear strong. But every mask you wear comes at a cost, the disconnection from your essence. Becoming who you truly are requires you to break with who you were taught to be. It demands inner confrontation. You must question inherited beliefs, unlearn outdated patterns, and challenge the internalized voices that tell you you're not enough. This is not a comfortable process. The ego resists. The shadow surfaces. Old identities begin to fall apart. But in that collapse, something real begins to emerge. Authenticity is not self-expression for its own sake. It's alignment. When your outer life begins to reflect your inner truth, a kind of peace arises that no external achievement can replicate. Your relationships become more honest. Your work becomes more meaningful. Your voice gains strength, not from volume, but from rootedness. You stop performing and start living. This journey is not linear. It's cyclical. You meet deeper layers of yourself as you grow. Each challenge, loss, or crisis becomes another invitation to return to your center. Often, it's through pain that you are initiated into your real self, because suffering strips away illusion. It reveals what cannot be taken from you, your essence. And this is the great privilege, not wealth, not power, not recognition, but the chance to become someone who is no longer at war with themselves, someone who knows what they value, who they are, what they're here to do, someone who does not chase life, but embodies it. The privilege of a lifetime is not to become impressive. It is to become whole. It is to walk in the world not as a reflection of what others expect, but as a living, breathing expression of your own truth. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. This is not a poetic exaggeration. It's a psychological fact. We often believe that clarity is something external, a better plan, a mentor's advice, a sign from the universe. But as long as you're disconnected from your own inner world, even the best advice will feel hollow. Until you look into your heart, into your emotions, your truths, your values, your vision will be blurry and your path will feel uncertain. The reason is simple. Vision is not just about what you want to do. It's about who you are. And who you are lives in the heart, not in the mind. The mind can calculate and compare. It can plan and strategize. But it cannot give you purpose. Purpose rises from the heart, from the parts of you that know what matters even when logic disagrees. Most people are afraid to look inward because the heart doesn't lie. It carries inconvenient truths. It knows when you're faking passion, when you're settling, when you're betraying your deepest self for comfort or approval. So instead of facing that inner mirror, we distract ourselves. We chase someone else's dream. We overthink. We stay busy. We search endlessly for a sign, not realizing that the clearest sign is waiting inside. Looking into your own heart is not about sentimentality. It's about radical honesty. It means asking difficult questions. What am I avoiding? What do I really desire, not what I think I should want? Where have I silenced my own voice? These are not comfortable questions, but they are clarifying. When you can face them, you start to strip away illusion. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, demands inner work. It requires turning away from the outer noise and listening to the inner guide. And that guide doesn't shout. It whispers. Which is why so many miss it. But once you hear it, your decisions become cleaner. Not easier, but truer. Your heart knows what aligns with your soul. It knows when a job is just a paycheck. It knows when a relationship is draining your essence. It knows when you're pretending to be someone you're not. And it knows what lights you up in a way that no external validation ever could. That's the clarity we long for, not just knowing what to do, but knowing that it matters. The heart is not irrational. It's deep. And when you ignore it, your vision becomes hijacked by fear, comparison, or ego. You start chasing goals that look good but feel wrong. You end up successful on the outside and empty on the inside. But when you return to the heart, when you're willing to feel your way into your future, you gain something that no productivity system can give you: alignment. Clarity is not the absence of doubt. It's the presence of self-trust. And self-trust is born when you've spent enough time with your own truth to recognize its voice. The more you look into your heart, the more your vision aligns with who you really are. Not who you're trying to be, not who others want you to be, but who you were meant to become. Knowing your darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others, because when you are unaware of your own shadow, you will constantly be disturbed, triggered, or manipulated by what you see in someone else. But once you've faced your own inner chaos, you no longer fear it in others. You recognize it. You respond to it not with panic, but with understanding. You stop projecting, and you start seeing clearly. The shadow, as Carl Jung described, is everything in us that we refuse to acknowledge. Our jealousy, rage, shame, resentment, selfishness, fear. These are the aspects of the psyche we try to suppress because they don't fit the image we want to present to the world. But what we suppress doesn't disappear. It simply retreats underground, gaining energy and influence. And when someone else's behavior reflects our buried emotions, we react. We criticize. We condemn. Or we collapse. This is projection. The parts of ourselves we disown, we see in others. If you've never made peace with your own manipulative tendencies, you'll be hyper-alert to manipulation in others. If you're deeply ashamed of your own anger, someone else's rage will seem monstrous. But when you've sat with your own darkness, when you've studied it, understood it, and made peace with it, you're no longer shocked when it appears in someone else. You may not like it, but you're not ruled by it. Knowing your darkness is not about justifying bad behavior. It's about developing discernment. The more you understand your shadow, the more clearly you can spot when someone is acting from theirs. And instead of reacting blindly, you can respond wisely. You can set boundaries without guilt. You can walk away without drama. You can say no without shame. Because you've already confronted the chaos inside you. You no longer need to be afraid of it in others. This kind of self-knowledge creates resilience. It allows you to deal with toxic dynamics without becoming toxic yourself. You don't get pulled into power games because you've already owned your own thirst for control. You don't crumble under criticism because you've already faced the harshest inner voice. You become grounded, not because the world is safe, but because you are no longer easily shaken. People who refuse to look at their darkness often become the most judgmental. They need the illusion of moral superiority to cover their own unexamined fears. But people who have faced their darkness become more compassionate, not just toward others, but toward themselves. They can forgive without enabling. They can understand without excusing. They can love without losing themselves. And perhaps most importantly, they can offer something rare in this world: presence. To be with another human being in their pain or confusion without needing to fix them or flee from them is a gift. But that gift is only possible when you've learned to sit with your own shadow. To know your darkness is to develop inner strength. To accept your darkness is to grow in wisdom. And to integrate your darkness is to become a light that doesn't blind, but reveals. A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. To repress something is not to conquer it. To deny a part of yourself is not to master it. What you avoid doesn't disappear. It waits, it watches, it grows. Carl Jung understood that true transformation requires not suppression, but confrontation. You cannot transcend your instincts, your compulsions, your emotional storms by pretending they aren't there. You must go through them. You must descend into the fire. Passion is often mistaken for weakness, for instability, for chaos, but passion is raw power. It's life force energy. What makes it dangerous isn't its existence, but its denial. The person who fears their own passion becomes a slave to it. They lash out uncontrollably or smother it until it explodes. They develop addictions, obsessions, or toxic attachments, not because they are too passionate, but because they are disconnected from the source of that passion. They've never entered the inferno. They've only circled it from a distance, pretending it isn't theirs. To pass through the inferno of your passions is to engage with the primal parts of yourself: your hunger, your lust, your rage, your grief, your craving for power or recognition. These are not polite emotions. They are not socially approved, but they are human. And until you've wrestled with them, not as enemies, but as parts of your own soul, you haven't really met yourself. Jung called this the shadow, those unconscious forces that shape your behavior without your awareness. When you repress your passions, they don't go away. They move underground. They influence your choices, your relationships, your identity. They cause you to judge others for traits you secretly envy or fear in yourself. They leak out in passive aggression, in obsessive control, in self-sabotage. You think you're being rational, but really, you're avoiding the fire. But fire is not just destruction, it is transformation. When you walk into the inferno with consciousness, something profound happens. You stop running. You start listening. You begin to ask, what is this rage protecting? What does this desire reveal? What unmet need is driving this behavior? Passion, once faced, becomes power. Once understood, it becomes purpose. To overcome your passions, you must allow them to speak, not to dominate your life, but to be integrated into it. A man who has passed through the inferno doesn't fear his own intensity. He knows his rage, and so he can choose peace. He knows his lust, and so he can choose love. He knows his hunger, and so he can choose discipline. His power doesn't come from denial. It comes from depth. You cannot become whole by amputating parts of yourself. You become whole by entering the places you've been taught to fear. And when you do, you emerge not as someone who is emotionless, but as someone who is emotionally sovereign. Passion doesn't control you. You carry it with awareness. You've walked through your own fire and survived. And that, more than anything, is what makes you strong. Loneliness does not come from being alone. It comes from not being able to communicate the things that matter most. True isolation isn't physical, it's psychological and emotional. You can be surrounded by people, family, friends, co-workers, and still feel completely alone if your inner world remains unshared, unheard, and unacknowledged. Carl Jung understood that human beings are not fulfilled by proximity or surface connection, but by meaning, by the ability to express and be seen in the truths that live beneath our everyday roles. At the root of most loneliness is not the absence of company, but the absence of authenticity. When you can't speak your truth, when you feel like no one would understand your fears, your longings, your insights, or your pain, you begin to feel invisible. You smile, nod, laugh on cue, but inside, a part of you is aching. Not for more people, but for more depth, for resonance, for the sacred experience of being truly met. This kind of loneliness isn't solved by small talk or casual companionship. It's a hunger for connection that reaches below the surface. It's a yearning to bring forward the thoughts that keep you awake at night, the memories you can't shake, the dreams you're afraid to say out loud. But if the world around you doesn't feel safe enough, or if you've been conditioned to hide what makes you different, you begin to silence yourself. And the more you silence yourself, the more alone you become. Loneliness grows in the spaces where truth is unspoken. And many people remain lonely not because no one is listening, but because they've forgotten how to speak from the soul. They've been taught to avoid vulnerability, to stay agreeable, to keep things light. But the things that matter most, grief, love, mortality, purpose, shame, passion, fear, are not light. They're heavy. And the willingness to carry them into a conversation is what creates true connection. Sometimes loneliness comes from feeling too different, too deep, too intense, too thoughtful in a world obsessed with speed and surface. You may begin to wonder if you're the problem. But you are not too much. You are just waiting for spaces that can hold the full spectrum of your being. And those spaces only form when someone dares to break the script and say something real. To overcome loneliness, you must take the risk of truth. You must find or create relationships where honesty is more valuable than comfort, where depth is welcomed and silence is respected. And most importantly, you must be willing to share what matters to you, even if your voice shakes. Especially then. The paradox is that when you begin to speak your truth, even if no one responds perfectly, the loneliness starts to dissolve. Because now you are connected to yourself. You're no longer abandoning your own reality for the sake of fitting in. You're living from the inside out. And in that place, you don't just seek connection, you attract it. Not with everyone, but with the ones who matter. The ones who are also waiting to say what they've never said. Until you own your projections, you'll keep mistaking others for enemies. This is one of the most difficult truths in human psychology to accept, and one of the most liberating. Carl Jung understood projection as the unconscious act of assigning qualities, especially disowned or repressed ones, onto other people. When you haven't faced a part of yourself, it doesn't vanish. It simply appears outside of you, reflected in the people who irritate, trigger, or threaten you. You don't see them clearly. You see yourself, distorted and denied. Projection is how the unconscious communicates. It shows you what you've pushed away. If you've never acknowledged your own capacity for selfishness, you'll constantly notice how selfish everyone else seems. If you're uncomfortable with your own power, you'll view confident people as arrogant or domineering. If you carry unresolved guilt, you'll see judgment in faces that are merely neutral. The danger of projection is that it feels real. You believe your interpretation of others is objective, but often it's your shadow speaking. This dynamic ruins relationships and creates unnecessary conflict. You begin to build narratives around people not based on who they are, but based on what you can't see in yourself. You assign motive where there is none. You overreact. You cut people off not because they are truly toxic, but because they reflect something you're afraid to admit. And so your world becomes populated with imagined enemies. people who challenge the illusion of who you think you are. But when you begin to own your projections, everything changes. You pause before reacting. You start asking deeper questions. What part of me is being reflected here? Why does this situation provoke me so intensely? Is this about them or about something in me that's unresolved? This doesn't mean other people don't have flaws. It means you recognize the difference between what belongs to them and what belongs to you. Taking back your projections is an act of maturity. It means you stop outsourcing your emotional life. You stop blaming others for feelings that originated in your own psyche. You begin the hard but honest work of reclaiming your shadow, your fear, your anger, your desire, your envy, your insecurity. Not to justify bad behavior, but to integrate the parts of yourself you've avoided. This integration creates clarity. You start to see people more accurately. You respond instead of react. You stop feeling threatened by difference. You can disagree without needing to destroy. You no longer need others to be villains, so you can remain the hero in your own story. Instead, you become a whole person, one who sees complexity, nuance, and shared humanity. Owning your projections doesn't make life easier, but it makes it real. You stop living in a world of mirrors and start living in a world of relationships. You don't walk around bracing for attack, you walk around grounded in truth. And when someone truly is harmful or untrustworthy, you'll see it not through the lens of fear or projection, but through discernment. That's the difference between living in projection and living in presence. One binds you in illusion, the other sets you free. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. This truth dismantles one of the most persistent illusions we're taught to believe, that there is a single, correct way to live. From a young age, we are conditioned to follow templates of success, morality, identity, even happiness. We are told how to behave, what to desire, what to avoid, and how to measure whether our lives are on track. But what works for one person may suffocate another. What liberates one soul may imprison the next. Carl Jung's philosophy was rooted in the uniqueness of the individual. He understood that the path to becoming oneself, what he called individuation, is deeply personal. No two people carry the same wounds, instincts, archetypes, or unconscious material. So no two lives should follow the same map. Yet most people live under borrowed expectations. They wear shoes designed for other feet. And then they wonder why they feel discomfort, anxiety, or emptiness. Social institutions, education, religion, media often promote one-size-fits-all solutions. Study this, marry by this age, earn this amount, believe this, suppress that. These systems can provide structure, but they often fail to account for the mystery of the individual psyche. When you try to conform to a lifestyle, a career, or a relationship model that doesn't resonate with your inner truth, it's like forcing your foot into someone else's shoe. It might look good on the outside, but inside you're blistering, you're aching, you're slowly losing touch with what's real for you. The path to an authentic life doesn't begin with imitation. It begins with inquiry. You must ask yourself, what actually fits me? What am I forcing myself to endure just because others have? What beliefs am I holding that don't feel alive in my own experience? These are not rebellious questions. They are necessary ones. Because until you begin to differentiate your truth from collective programming, you're not really living, you're performing. And this doesn't only apply to major life decisions. It applies to how you process emotions, how you love, how you create, how you rest, how you find meaning. Some people thrive in solitude, others in community. Some need structure, others need spontaneity. Some find purpose in stillness, others in movement. There is no universal blueprint. There is only alignment, or the absence of it. Of course, finding what fits isn't always immediate. It requires experimentation. You try, you fail, you adjust. You listen to the quiet signals from your body and psyche: tightness, fatigue, dread, enthusiasm, energy, peace. These are not random feelings. They are feedback. Your life is speaking to you, moment by moment, telling you whether you're walking your path or someone else's. When you accept that no shoe fits everyone, you stop comparing. You stop resenting others for their choices, and you stop judging yourself for not matching theirs. You begin to respect the sacred diversity of the human experience. And most importantly, you start crafting a life that doesn't just look right. It feels right. A life molded not by imitation, but by inner resonance. A life that finally fits. Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol, morphine, or idealism. At first glance, it's easy to understand the danger of substances like alcohol and morphine. They alter the body and mind, create dependency, and often ruin lives. But Carl Jung's warning goes deeper. He includes idealism in the same category. That's because addiction is not about the substance itself, it's about the escape. It's the compulsion to numb, to avoid, to disconnect from reality, whether by drowning in chemicals or in beautiful-sounding ideas. Addiction, at its root, is an attempt to avoid pain. It's a substitute for something essential that is missing, a connection to self, to meaning, to spirit. The alcoholic may be seeking relief from internal emptiness. The morphine user may be seeking silence from unbearable pain. But the idealist? The idealist may be trying to escape the complexity of life by living in abstract perfection. And that's just as dangerous. Because while a bottle may destroy the body, unchecked idealism can corrode the soul. Idealism becomes an addiction when it blinds you to the real. When you pursue purity, perfection, or utopia with such intensity that you lose compassion for the messy, imperfect truth of human experience. It happens in politics, religion, activism, even in personal development. The idealist says this is how the world should be, and begins to reject anything that doesn't fit that vision. Soon, they're not living, they're crusading. Not relating, they're judging. Not healing, they're dividing. This form of addiction is especially insidious because it's praised. Idealism often disguises itself as moral superiority, but it can become a way to avoid looking at your own shadow. You preach compassion, but secretly resent those who don't conform. You promote peace, but harbor violence toward those who disagree. You pursue enlightenment, but reject the parts of yourself that are still afraid, jealous, angry, or lost. In the name of ideals, you deny your humanity and the humanity of others. Addiction of any kind robs you of presence. Whether you're intoxicated by a substance or by a belief system, you are removed from what is, from the real, the raw, the unresolved now. And healing, transformation, and connection can only happen in the now. Jung understood that facing reality is the hardest, most courageous act. It requires you to be uncomfortable, to accept contradiction, to live without certainty. That's why people seek escape. But what we escape always waits for our return. The antidote to addiction is not rigid self-control. It's self-awareness. It's recognizing when you are reaching for something, not out of joy, but out of fear. It's understanding what pain you are trying to avoid. It's asking yourself, what am I unwilling to feel? Because that question often reveals the root of every addictive pattern. Even noble ideas, when clung to without question, can become cages. Freedom is not found in perfect beliefs. It's found in embracing life as it is, flawed, changing, real. When you can live fully in reality without needing to escape it, you're no longer addicted. you're awake. Shame is a soul wound that becomes a lifelong prison unless healed. Unlike guilt, which arises from something you've done, shame convinces you that you are what's wrong. It doesn't whisper, "You made a mistake." It screams, "You're the mistake." And once internalized, that voice becomes the lens through which you see your entire life. Relationships become strained, opportunities feel undeserved, and even moments of joy carry a sense of guilt. You live behind a mask, fearing that if anyone saw the truth of you, they would turn away. Carl Jung understood the psyche not as a machine, but as a living system. Deep, symbolic, and wounded not just by trauma, but by disconnection from the self. Shame is one of the deepest ruptures in that system. It's not just a feeling, it's a fracture, a split between who you are and who you believe you must be to be loved, accepted, or safe. And once that fracture occurs, most people don't heal it. They build around it. They construct personas to hide it. They become perfectionists, workaholics, people-pleasers. They achieve, they perform, they control. Not because they are driven, but because they are terrified. If I'm perfect, I won't be rejected. If I'm useful, I'll be kept. If I'm invisible, I won't be hurt. These strategies may create temporary success, but inside, the shame remains. Unseen, unspoken, untouched. Shame is cunning. It hides behind sarcasm, anger, withdrawal. It convinces you that vulnerability is weakness, that you must hide your flaws, your fears, your past. It keeps you silent about your needs, your pain, and even your dreams. It tells you that you're too much, or not enough, or both at the same time. It wraps itself around your identity until you no longer see it as a wound. You see it as who you are. And yet it is not. Shame is a wound. It was taught to you. Somewhere along the line, you were made to feel unacceptable by a parent, a teacher, a peer group, or a society that punished difference and rewarded conformity. Healing begins when you question the origin of that belief, when you realize that your worth was never meant to be conditional, that your value is not dependent on being flawless or fitting in. It is inherent. To heal shame is not to erase the past. It is to bring light to the places that have been kept in the dark. It is to speak the unspeakable, to sit with your younger self, the one who was shamed, and say, "You didn't deserve that." Healing is reclamation. It is self-forgiveness. It is learning how to be seen without armor and still feel safe. It is allowing yourself to be loved, not despite your imperfections, but with them. Without healing, shame becomes your prison, but with healing, it becomes your teacher. It shows you where you abandoned yourself and offers you the key to return. The goal is not to become someone else, but to finally be at peace with who you are. Not because you've earned it, but because you've remembered you were always worthy. Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. This idea from Carl Jung cuts to the core of human relationships, organizations, and even inner conflict. Love and power are not inherently incompatible, but they operate in entirely different realms. Love seeks connection, understanding, and union. Power seeks control, dominance, and influence. When one is present in its purest form, the other diminishes. That's why so many relationships fall into imbalance, because we often mistake power for strength and love for weakness. Power, when misused, becomes a form of fear management. The ego craves power to feel safe, to avoid vulnerability, to stay one step ahead of rejection or betrayal. It demands control over outcomes, people, and narratives. But love, true love, requires the opposite. It demands openness, surrender, trust. You cannot truly love someone and simultaneously try to dominate them, because domination creates distance. It creates a hierarchy where there should be equality. It makes one person the subject, the other the object. In intimate relationships, this tension is especially visible. When one partner exerts power through manipulation, silence, emotional control, or dominance, love begins to deteriorate. It becomes conditional, transactional. The relationship may survive, but it no longer breathes. Love cannot thrive in an atmosphere where one person must win and the other must lose. In such dynamics, affection becomes a reward, honesty becomes a risk, and vulnerability becomes a weapon. You start protecting yourself from the person you're supposed to feel safest with. On a societal scale, the same dynamic plays out. When institutions, governments, or leaders are obsessed with control, they often cloak their actions in the language of love or protection. But the presence of fear, coercion, or surveillance betrays the truth. Love is no longer the guiding force. Love includes. Power divides. Love liberates. Power, when unchecked, confines. Even within the self, this battle between love and power rages silently. The parts of us that crave perfection, that push relentlessly, that punish us for rest or softness, these are not born of love. They are born of fear disguised as discipline. Inner power, when misaligned, becomes self-oppression. You override your needs, suppress your feelings, disconnect from your truth, all to maintain an illusion of control. But healing happens when inner power is replaced with inner compassion. When love governs your relationship with yourself, there is no need to dominate your thoughts or feelings. You listen. You hold space. You evolve from acceptance, not self-aggression. That doesn't mean power is evil. Power can serve love when it is guided by it. The power to protect, to act, to stand up, to set boundaries, these are necessary. But when power becomes the goal instead of the tool, love vanishes. Jung wasn't condemning power entirely. He was warning of its priority. When you lead with love, power becomes a servant. When you lead with power, love becomes a casualty. The real work is learning how to lead, live, and relate from a place where love is not an afterthought, but the foundation. Because in any space where love rules, within a heart, a home, or a nation, power no longer needs to dominate. It can simply support. You meet your destiny on the road you took to avoid it. This is not just a poetic twist of fate. It is one of the most profound psychological truths Carl Jung ever revealed. It speaks to the mysterious way life brings us face to face with the very thing we are running from. We make choices to protect ourselves, to stay safe, to avoid pain, conflict, or uncertainty. And yet, those very choices circle back to confront us with the exact experience we feared most. Destiny, it seems, is not a path you walk in a straight line. It's a spiral, and it brings you back again and again to what you must face in order to grow. Avoidance is one of the most common psychological defense mechanisms. We avoid our wounds by staying busy. We avoid rejection by people-pleasing. We avoid vulnerability by building walls. We avoid risk by staying in comfort. But avoidance doesn't erase what we fear, it only delays the encounter. The unconscious mind has its own logic, and it's far more determined than the conscious mind. What is unresolved will resurface. What is denied will manifest elsewhere. And what we try hardest not to become often appears in the mirror of our circumstances. You might avoid emotional intimacy because of past heartbreak, only to find yourself in relationships where the lack of vulnerability creates more pain than the original wound. You might avoid leadership because of a fear of failure, only to end up in positions where you are forced to lead when the stakes are highest. You might run from your creative calling because of self-doubt, only to feel suffocated in every role that doesn't let your true voice be heard. The patterns repeat, not as punishment, but as invitation. Life wants you to meet yourself. Jung believed in the guiding force of the unconscious, not as a blind force, but as something with intention. The psyche wants integration. It wants wholeness, and it will orchestrate your life to bring unhealed material to the surface. That's why avoidance never works long term. You can change cities, careers, partners, but your unresolved inner world will follow you, because it is you. Until you turn and face what you've been avoiding, it remains in control. Destiny is not a fixed endpoint, but a pattern unfolding through your choices, especially the ones you resist. The harder you work to avoid something, the more power it gains over you. But when you stop running, when you face the road you tried to avoid, something begins to shift. You start to see that your fears were messengers, that your resistance was a signal, that your destiny was never about avoiding pain. It was about becoming someone who could meet it with grace. There is no road that leads you away from yourself. Every path, especially the one you hope to escape, bends back toward your truth. You meet your destiny not because it chases you, but because it is you, waiting at the very place you refuse to go. When you arrive, not despite your fear, but because you had the courage to walk through it, you realize you were never lost. You were always on the way. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. This is one of Carl Jung's most piercing observations about human nature, and one of the most unsettling. Beneath the surface of daily life, beneath the habits, roles, routines, and distractions, lies the truth of who we are. But that truth is often buried, not by accident, but by design. To face your soul is to confront everything you've denied, suppressed, or feared within yourself. And most people would rather build entire worlds of illusion than look in that mirror. The soul doesn't speak in socially acceptable terms. It doesn't care about reputation, performance, or public image. It speaks in longings you've silenced, in dreams you've ignored, in pain you've minimized, and in patterns you pretend not to see. Facing the soul means turning toward the shadow. It means acknowledging the grief you carry, the rage you repress, the needs you were taught to disown. It means dismantling the mask you wear so well that you've come to believe it's your face. This is why avoidance is so common, and often so creative. People will fill their lives with noise to avoid the silence that might expose what's underneath. They'll pour themselves into work, achievements, shopping, even spiritual practices. Anything that keeps them from sitting still long enough to hear their soul's voice. Some will cling to ideologies or rigid belief systems not because they are true, but because they offer structure, a shield against the chaos that introspection might reveal. Others will chase drama, create chaos, or fall into addiction, because anything, even pain, feels safer than inner stillness. But the cost of avoidance is steep. What is unfaced becomes your fate. What you bury doesn't disappear. It rules your life from the shadows. Unacknowledged wounds bleed into relationships. Unexpressed emotions surface as anxiety, depression, or physical illness. Your soul doesn't stop speaking just because you're not listening. It finds other ways, through conflict, through loss, through dreams, through longing. And eventually, it demands to be seen. Facing your soul is not about becoming enlightened or perfect. It's about becoming honest. It's about sitting with what is true, even if it's uncomfortable. It's about holding your contradictions with compassion, your light and your shadow, your beauty and your brokenness. It is the hardest work you'll ever do, not because your soul is your enemy, but because you've spent a lifetime building defenses against it. But once you turn inward, once you face what you've been running from, everything begins to change. You stop needing to prove yourself. You stop trying to outrun your pain. You begin to feel the weight of self-abandonment lift. You begin to experience presence, not as a performance, but as peace. You come into contact with something deeper than personality, deeper than conditioning. You touch essence. And in that space, life no longer feels like something happening to you. It becomes something you live from the inside out. That is the paradox. By daring to face your soul, you no longer have to run. Because now, finally, you are home. To confront a person with their shadow is to show them their own light. At first, this might sound contradictory. How can revealing the darkest, most hidden parts of someone lead them toward illumination? But that is exactly what Carl Jung meant. The shadow is not simply the repository of shameful or destructive impulses. It is also the storehouse of repressed power, creativity, potential, and authenticity. To confront the shadow is not to shame, it is to liberate. It is to point someone back to what they truly are, beneath all the roles and defenses. Most people live split from themselves. They are conscious of the parts they have accepted, perhaps kindness, discipline, helpfulness, but unconscious of what they've rejected. They disown anger, jealousy, neediness, selfishness, ambition. But these rejected traits don't vanish. They live on in the unconscious, forming the shadow. And this division is the root of inner conflict. A person may want success but sabotage it. They may long for intimacy but push others away. They may appear confident while inwardly crumbling. Until the shadow is brought into the light, these contradictions remain unexplained and often unbearable. To confront someone with their shadow is to hold up a mirror, not to accuse, but to reveal. It may be uncomfortable, even painful. The ego will resist, deflect, rationalize. But if done with compassion and clarity, that confrontation can be a turning point. Because within the shadow is not only darkness, it is light trapped in disguise. The person who represses their anger may discover, when they finally face it, the power to set boundaries. The one who hides their envy may uncover a buried ambition. The one ashamed of their sensitivity may reclaim their intuitive gifts. The shadow hides what we fear and what we need most. The greatest teachers, therapists, and even friends are those who can see someone's shadow without flinching. They don't just echo affirmations, they reflect truth. They don't just soothe, they challenge. And in doing so, they awaken something dormant in the other person, the capacity to become whole. Because to own your shadow is to reclaim your full self. You are no longer ruled by what you don't understand. You are no longer ashamed of what you've buried. You stop running. You start integrating. There's also a deep paradox here. When someone truly sees their shadow, they often experience a sense of lightness. The energy once used to suppress or perform is freed. They begin to feel real, grounded, connected. Not because they've become better, but because they've become whole. Wholeness is not perfection. It is inclusion. It is making space for the full spectrum of your humanity and realizing that nothing within you needs to be exiled. To confront someone with their shadow is not to condemn them. It is to extend an invitation to live with more freedom, more truth, and more inner peace. The light is not found by escaping the dark, but by entering it and discovering that even there, the soul is present, waiting to be seen. When a person is brave enough to look, they don't just find their wounds. They find their brilliance hidden beneath them. Synchronicity reveals the invisible threads connecting your life. It is not coincidence dressed in mystery. It is meaning woven through time. Carl Jung used the word synchronicity to describe those moments when something happens in the external world that mirrors something deeply internal, without a causal link, but with undeniable significance. A thought you've had for days suddenly appears in conversation with a stranger. A dream about someone you haven't seen in years, followed by their unexpected message. A book falls off the shelf, answering a question you hadn't yet dared to ask. These are not random events. They are the psyche and the world in conversation. Synchronicity challenges the mechanical cause and effect way we've been taught to see reality. It suggests that life is not just a series of linear events, but a symbolic dance between the inner and outer worlds. Your unconscious mind, full of desires, fears, questions, and archetypes, is not silent. It reaches out into the fabric of reality, calling back to you what you need to see, feel, or learn next. And the more attuned you become to your own inner landscape, the more you notice these mysterious alignments. Most people experience synchronicity without realizing it. They call it luck, serendipity, or déjà vu. But to recognize synchronicity consciously is to recognize that your life is not disconnected fragments. It is a living web of meaning. Every encounter, every delay, every pattern is part of a deeper unfolding. The missed train that leads to a life-changing meeting. The song that plays exactly when your heart needs it. The unexpected obstacle that redirects you to a better path. Synchronicity is life's way of saying, you are being seen. These moments become more frequent the more present you are. When your mind is silent, your attention sharp, and your heart open, you begin to notice the symbolic layer of experience. You realize that the people you meet are mirrors, that the timing of things carries messages, that the world is not mute, it is communicating through symbols, patterns, and emotion. You stop asking only, what's happening, and begin asking, what is this trying to show me? Jung believed synchronicity was a sign of individuation, the process of becoming your true self. As you move closer to alignment with your inner truth, outer events begin to reflect that shift. It's not magic, but a kind of energetic resonance. Your life starts to flow with a rhythm that feels guided, not forced. You take a step, and the ground rises to meet you. You ask, and the answer appears. Not always in the way you expect, but always in the way you need. The beauty of synchronicity is that it returns meaning to the seemingly mundane. It reminds you that you are not alone, not by chance, not adrift. You are part of something larger, more intelligent, and more interconnected than logic alone can explain. And when you live with this awareness, you begin to trust the timing of your life. You begin to see that nothing is wasted, that even detours are sacred, and that every moment carries the potential for revelation. Synchronicity is not a trick of fate. It is the soul speaking in the language of pattern and purpose. The psyche is a self-regulating system, like the body. Just as the body strives for balance, correcting imbalances in temperature, blood sugar, or heart rate, the psyche also works constantly to maintain psychological equilibrium. Carl Jung saw the mind not as a passive container of thoughts, but as a dynamic, living organism, responding to internal and external stimuli with remarkable intelligence. When something goes off balance, when one aspect of the personality is overemphasized or another suppressed, the psyche doesn't sit quietly. It intervenes. Symptoms, dreams, mood swings, projections, anxieties, these are not random disturbances. They are the psyche's attempts to reestablish harmony. Just as fever is the body's response to infection, a psychological crisis can be the mind's way of demanding change. Depression, for example, might not be a failure of spirit, but a call inward, a signal that the current mode of living no longer supports your wholeness. Anxiety might not be irrational fear, but the tension created when your outer life is misaligned with your inner truth. This concept of self-regulation means that the psyche is always trying to restore wholeness. It doesn't want repression, it wants integration. When one function, such as thinking, feeling, sensing, or intuiting, dominates the personality at the expense of the others. The unconscious begins to generate material that calls for balance. If you're overly rational, for example, your dreams may become rich in emotion and imagery, trying to reawaken your feeling function. If you're emotionally overwhelmed, your psyche may push you toward detachment or structure, trying to give form to your chaos. This dynamic is why ignoring the unconscious never works. The psyche will insist on being heard. The more you suppress, the more it compensates, often in extreme ways. Nightmares intensify. Relationships suffer. Physical symptoms emerge. These are not punishments. They are messages. The psyche doesn't care about appearances. It cares about wholeness. And it will do whatever it must to bring you back into relationship with yourself. Understanding the psyche as self-regulating also reframes how we view inner work. Healing is not about fixing a broken mind. It's about listening to the mind's natural intelligence. It's about learning the language of dreams, understanding emotional signals, and watching for patterns that reveal what the unconscious is trying to express. Jung called this process individuation, the unfolding of the self through the integration of conscious and unconscious elements. Just as the body heals when given the right conditions, rest, nutrition, care, the psyche begins to realign when given attention, reflection, and space. Therapy, meditation, journaling, dream work, these are not interventions. They are invitations. Invitations for the psyche to speak freely, to be witnessed, to bring the hidden into the light. This perspective invites a kind of trust. You don't have to control everything. You don't have to have all the answers. If you listen carefully, the psyche will guide you, not always through clarity, but through signs, repetition, resistance, resonance. What you feel drawn to, what you avoid, what keeps showing up. These are the indicators of where balance is seeking to return. When you stop resisting the symptoms and start honoring the messages, you align yourself with the psyche's deeper wisdom. And that wisdom, like the body's, doesn't strive for perfection. It strives for wholeness. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. To awaken to yourself is not a gentle unfolding. It is often a tearing, a breaking, a stripping away of illusion. Carl Jung understood that the process of becoming conscious, of seeing your life, your mind, your patterns with clear eyes, comes with a price. And that price is the loss of comfort, the death of denial, and the confrontation with everything within you that you've tried to avoid. Pain is not the opposite of awakening. It is its doorway. It is the friction that forces awareness, the signal that something within you is out of alignment with truth. Most people avoid pain because they believe it is something to be eradicated, but pain, especially psychological pain, is rarely without purpose. It points, it teaches, it invites. It says, "Look here." When you begin the journey inward, you quickly realize why so few people choose to walk it. The unconscious is not a passive realm. It holds memories you've repressed, emotions you've numbed, and truths that challenge your identity. To become conscious means having to admit that the life you've built may not be entirely yours. That the person you've become may be a product of adaptation, not authenticity. That your strengths may have grown from trauma, and your confidence may be armor. These realizations cut deep, but they also cut clean. Pain has a way of cracking the ego, and once the ego cracks, light gets in. You begin to see the source of your suffering, not just its symptoms. You realize your anger isn't random. It's a signal of betrayal or unmet needs. Your anxiety isn't weakness. It's your psyche waving a red flag, telling you that your inner world has been abandoned. Your sadness isn't dysfunction. It's grief over the self you've left behind. None of these emotions are flaws. They are messengers. Coming to consciousness means listening to them, not fixing, not running, but listening. This process is uncomfortable because it dismantles everything you thought would keep you safe. The beliefs, the stories, the roles, they begin to lose their hold. And for a time, it can feel like losing yourself. But what's actually happening is that you're shedding who you are not. There is no true growth without discomfort, because real growth asks you to leave behind familiar identities. And letting go of who you thought you were is painful. But it is also liberating, because what remains after the burning away is real. It's not polished for approval. It's not designed to survive. It's who you were before the world told you what to be. Pain doesn't just break you open. It reshapes you. It reveals depth. It teaches compassion. It humbles and empowers all at once. And eventually, it gives way to something deeper than comfort: peace. Not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of truth. When you've walked through your own fire, you stop fearing the heat. You know now that pain is not the enemy. Unconsciousness is. And the only way out of suffering is through awareness, through the pain, through yourself. You cannot transcend what you refuse to see. Transformation is not a bypass route. It is a descent before it becomes a rise. You cannot heal a wound by pretending it's not there. You cannot grow beyond your past if you keep it buried. What is unacknowledged will always rule you from the shadows. Carl Jung understood that transcendence is not a clean escape from the darker parts of yourself. It is the integration of them. It is only by facing the truth of who you are, including the parts you've denied, that real elevation becomes possible. Avoidance feels safe. It's easier to stay busy, distracted, or spiritually detached than to look directly at the pain, contradictions, and flaws that lie within. Many people attempt to transcend too early. They try to ascend without grounding, to forgive without grieving, to love themselves without first acknowledging their self-hatred. But the psyche does not work that way. The parts of yourself that you suppress do not disappear. They fester. They become projections, addictions, judgments, and self-sabotage. You find yourself repeating cycles not because you are cursed, but because you refuse to look at what's driving them. Seeing, in this context, means more than intellectual understanding. It means full presence. It means feeling what you've avoided, listening to what you've silenced, and admitting what you've denied. It's the moment you stop justifying your patterns and start tracing them. It's when you no longer blame others for the pain you haven't dealt with. It's when you stop waiting for the world to change and begin the uncomfortable process of changing yourself. This kind of seeing is uncomfortable. It dismantles ego illusions. It shows you your part in the very pain you once thought was only done to you. It reveals where you've betrayed yourself to stay accepted, where you've compromised your truth for approval, and where you've projected your shame onto others. But in that discomfort lies freedom, because now you are in contact with reality, and only in reality can healing occur. Transcendence without self-awareness is performance. It looks good on the outside but collapses under pressure. You might be able to talk about higher consciousness, quote, ancient wisdom, or meditate for hours. But if you still lash out, if you still manipulate, if you still run from the rawness of your own experience, you have not transcended anything. You've just built a spiritual persona around your shadow. True transcendence is not light without shadow. It is light because of shadow. It's the clarity that comes from honesty. It's the peace that arises from reconciliation. It's the power that emerges when you no longer have to protect yourself from your own reflection. When you finally look at the parts of yourself you once feared, judged, or abandoned, you stop being a divided person. You stop living half a life. To transcend is to move beyond, but first, you must go within. You must look. You must feel. You must know. You cannot rise above what you have not yet met in yourself. You cannot free yourself from chains you've refused to see. And once you see them clearly, you realize the key was always in your hand. What you fear to look at contains what you seek. It sounds paradoxical, even unfair. Why would the very thing you've spent years avoiding be the doorway to your freedom? Because the human psyche is not linear. It is layered, symbolic, and rooted in unconscious truths. Carl Jung understood that the greatest treasures lie beneath the greatest terrors. The qualities, answers, and strengths we long for are often hidden inside the very emotions, memories, or aspects of self we have spent our lives pushing away. Avoidance is natural. We avoid what hurts, what shames, what confuses us. We construct identities around comfort zones, safe thoughts, safe behaviors, safe narratives. And we convince ourselves that the things we fear are external, that our pain comes from others, from circumstance, from the past. But if you trace fear to its source, it rarely resides in the outside world. It lives within, guarding something precious. That fear, that discomfort, is a threshold. It marks the edge of your current self and the entrance to the self you've yet to become. Consider what you fear to look at. Perhaps a past wound, a part of your personality you consider unacceptable, or a recurring pattern in your relationships. Now consider this. What if that wound contains your capacity to heal others? What if that personality trait, when reclaimed, holds the power you've denied yourself? What if that pattern is not punishment, but a clue leading you to your deepest unmet needs? The avoidance is not just about pain. It's about potential. The reason this truth is difficult to accept is because it threatens the ego. The ego prefers safety over truth. It tells you, don't go there. It's too painful, too complicated, too much. But the soul says, go deeper. Not to punish you, but to free you. The soul understands that only by facing the thing you fear can you access the strength, clarity, and wholeness you're really searching for. People spend years chasing success, love, peace, or purpose without realizing that the path runs straight through their fear. Not around it. Through it. The fear is not a barrier, it's a gatekeeper. It guards what you haven't yet claimed. This is why recurring struggles are so important. The same themes show up in your life, not because you're failing, but because something within is calling for your attention. The thing you're afraid to face has something to teach you, and that teaching is often the missing piece. When you finally turn toward the fear, whether it's a truth about your past, an emotion you've silenced, or a dream you've postponed, you begin to transform. Not because the fear disappears, but because you realize it was never as powerful as your avoidance made it seem. You see what's behind it. You find strength where there was once panic. You find compassion where there was once judgment. You find clarity where there was once confusion. The gold is always buried in the darkness. That's the mythic truth at the heart of every transformation story. What you fear to look at contains what you seek because it is where you left a part of yourself behind. And when you are willing to go back for it, you return not only more whole, but more alive. The unconscious is not just personal, it is collective. When you dream, when you react without knowing why, when you experience sudden insights or irrational fears, you are not only navigating your own psyche, you are touching something much older, deeper, and more universal. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the collective unconscious to explain why people across cultures, geographies, and histories share the same symbols, myths, and archetypes. Beneath the surface of your individual mind lies a vast, shared psychic inheritance, a blueprint of the human experience. This collective unconscious is populated by archetypes, ancient, recurring images and themes that show up in dreams, myths, art, and religion. The mother, the hero, the shadow, the trickster, the wise old man. These are not just characters in stories. They are psychological forces embedded in the structure of the psyche. You don't create these archetypes. You encounter them. They live in you before you ever become aware of them, shaping how you relate to life, to others, and to yourself. This means that your personal struggles are never just personal. When you face inner conflict, you are also engaging with themes that stretch back through generations. The fear of abandonment, the hunger for meaning, the battle between good and evil, these are not new. They are human, and recognizing this takes some of the isolation out of suffering. What you're feeling is not just yours, it's ours. It's what it means to be part of the great unfolding story of humanity. Dreams often reveal this more vividly than anything else. A person who has never studied mythology may dream of a journey through a dark forest, or a serpent offering wisdom, or a wise woman guiding them through chaos. These are not random images. They are the language of the collective unconscious speaking through your personal lens. Your dream is not only about your current life, it is participating in a symbolic narrative that transcends you. Understanding the collective unconscious also reshapes how we view history, culture, and even conflict. Prejudices, traumas, and ideologies often stem from collective psychic wounds. When entire societies are dominated by a single archetype, such as the warrior or the ruler, imbalances occur. The more a culture suppresses certain archetypes, the more they erupt in distorted ways. War, fanaticism, mass hysteria, these are collective shadow eruptions, born from what a society refuses to acknowledge in itself. And so the task of becoming conscious is not only individual, but collective. As you become more aware of your own patterns, projections, and archetypal dramas, you begin to deconstruct inherited beliefs. You stop acting out unconscious roles. You become more capable of understanding others, not just from a personal standpoint, but from a symbolic and historical one. You become a link in the chain of transformation, not just for yourself, but for the collective psyche. To work with the unconscious is to tap into something far more expansive than the self. It is to recognize that your story is part of a much larger myth. And when you begin to see that, you don't feel smaller, you feel connected. You stop carrying the illusion that you are alone in your struggles. You understand that beneath the differences of language, culture, and time, we are all dreaming the same dream. The unconscious is not just personal, it is collective. Beneath your thoughts, memories, and experiences lies a deeper layer of the psyche that does not belong to you alone. It is older than your childhood, older than your culture, older even than language. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious, a universal psychic structure that all human beings share. It is the inherited memory of the species, a reservoir of symbols, instincts, and archetypes that form the foundation of how we experience the world. You can feel this collective dimension in moments when something speaks to you beyond explanation. A myth from an ancient culture resonates with your modern life. A dream offers you a symbol you've never seen before but somehow recognize. You feel moved by music in a language you don't understand. These are echoes from the collective unconscious, proof that parts of your psyche are plugged into something vast and shared. Archetypes are the patterns that emerge from this layer of mind. They are not memories of specific events, but deep forms, like templates for human experience. The hero, the mother, the shadow, the trickster. These archetypes show up in stories, religions, rituals, and dreams across every time and culture. They are not taught, they are felt. A child instinctively fears abandonment or is drawn to stories of adventure because those emotional landscapes are already mapped within them. The collective unconscious is not a library of facts. It is a living system of symbolic truths. This collective layer also explains why people in different cultures can dream similar dreams, why the same themes recur in global mythologies, and why certain symbols, like snakes, rivers, or fire, carry similar psychological weight around the world. The personal unconscious contains your forgotten memories. The collective unconscious contains humanity's essential truths. And when you begin to explore it, you realize that your personal journey is interwoven with something much larger. Facing this truth can be both humbling and empowering. On one hand, it means that much of what you feel, fear, or desire is not unique to you. Your struggles with meaning, identity, death, love, and transformation are part of an ancient drama that every human participates in. On the other hand, it means you are never truly alone. The path you walk has been walked before. The symbols and stories that can guide you have been embedded in your psyche from the beginning. Working with the collective unconscious is not about escaping into abstraction. It's about finding grounding in something greater than the ego. As you encounter archetypes in your dreams, behaviors, or projections, you gain insight not only into yourself, but into humanity. You begin to understand your place in the larger human story. You see how personal healing ripples into collective healing, how breaking a personal pattern can contribute to shifting a cultural one. The unconscious is a mirror not just of the self, but of the species. And when you begin to look into that mirror, you realize that your inner world is made not only of private memories, but of shared myths, collective fears, and ancient truths. It is a sacred inheritance, and your awareness of it is what transforms it from mystery into meaning. You are not a single self. You are a constellation of selves. The idea of a singular, unchanging identity is a comforting illusion, but it's not how the psyche actually functions. Carl Jung understood that within each of us exists a multiplicity of inner characters, roles, instincts, and voices, often with conflicting needs and desires. You are not just one person. You are many. And the journey toward wholeness is not about eliminating the parts of you that clash, but about learning how to integrate and relate to them. There is the self you present to the world, your persona. This is the face you wear in public, the identity shaped by culture, family, profession, and expectation. It's useful. It helps you navigate society. But it is only one part of the whole. Behind it, there are other selves, the child who still carries unmet needs, the critic who whispers that nothing you do is ever enough, the dreamer with wild ambitions, the rebel who resents rules, the caretaker who puts others first, and the shadow who hides all the parts you've rejected or feared. Each of these selves arises in response to different situations, relationships, and moments in your life. You may find yourself confident in one context and insecure in another, loving one hour, resentful the next. These shifts aren't signs of inauthenticity. They're reflections of your inner complexity. The psyche is not linear. It's layered, multifaceted, alive. And when one part of you dominates while the others are ignored or suppressed, imbalance and inner conflict emerge. This is why people often feel stuck, torn, or emotionally overwhelmed. It's not because they are broken, it's because one part of them is fighting with another. The part that wants to rest battles the part that demands achievement. The self that craves connection struggles against the self that fears intimacy. The part that longs for change resists letting go. These internal contradictions are not failures. They are invitations. Each voice within you carries a piece of truth, a fragment of your totality. Jung believed that the path to individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires making conscious contact with these inner selves. That means recognizing them, understanding their origins, listening to what they need, and integrating their wisdom into your life. It's not about giving any one part total control. It's about creating inner dialogue, a council of selves rather than a dictatorship of the ego. When you begin to see yourself as a constellation rather than a single star, something powerful happens. Compassion. You stop judging yourself for being inconsistent. You stop demanding that one voice be the right one. You begin to understand why your reactions shift, why your values sometimes feel in tension, why your desires contradict each other. And instead of trying to simplify yourself, you learn to honor your inner complexity. You are not one self trying to hold everything together. You are a dynamic system of selves, each with its own timing, history, and insight. Wholeness doesn't mean sameness. It means integration, harmony through inner relationship. And the more you embrace your inner multiplicity, the more authentic, adaptable, and deeply human you become. The first half of life is about building. The second half is about becoming. This profound observation by Carl Jung captures the essential rhythm of human development, a movement from constructing external realities to exploring internal truths. In the first half of life, much of your energy goes into establishing identity, securing survival, and creating a foundation. You build your career, your family, your social roles. You learn the rules, accumulate possessions, and define yourself through achievements. This phase is necessary and vital. It provides structure and stability, but it is only the beginning. During this initial phase, the focus is often on meeting expectations, your own and others. You adapt to cultural norms, strive for success, and seek approval. You identify strongly with your persona, the mask you present to the world. You might suppress or ignore parts of yourself that don't fit the ideal you're trying to build. This outward construction is important because it grounds you in reality, but it can also become limiting if it remains the sole focus. As life progresses, a shift occurs. The first half of life no longer suffices. The questions deepen. Who am I beyond my roles and achievements? What is the meaning behind my successes and failures? What parts of myself have I neglected in my quest to build a stable life? This is the beginning of the second half of life, a journey inward toward becoming. It's less about acquiring and more about discovering, less about doing and more about being. In the second half, you confront the shadow aspects you once denied. You wrestle with contradictions within yourself, with loss, with mortality, and with the mysteries of existence. This phase calls for greater self-awareness and integration. It requires relinquishing old identities that no longer serve you, letting go of control, and embracing vulnerability. Becoming is a process of peeling back layers to reveal your authentic self, the self that is not defined by external markers, but by inner depth. This transition can be challenging. The security of building can feel threatened by the uncertainty of becoming. The roles and labels you once clung to may no longer fit, leading to crises of identity, purpose, or faith. But these struggles are necessary initiations. They push you to explore dimensions of yourself that were hidden beneath the surface of doing and achieving. In the second half of life, wisdom replaces ambition, compassion replaces judgment, presence replaces striving. You learn to listen to your body, your intuition, your deeper longings. You begin to live in alignment with values that transcend success and social validation. There is a growing recognition that true fulfillment arises not from external accomplishments, but from inner harmony. Jung saw this phase as essential for wholeness. The first half's building provides the container. The second half's becoming fills it with meaning. It is a movement from fragmentation to integration, from a scattered self to a unified one. And while society often glorifies the productivity of the first half, the second half holds the keys to peace, authenticity, and spiritual depth. Embracing this shift requires courage and patience. It means facing the impermanence of life and the inevitability of change. It means honoring the journey inward as much as the journey outward. But when you commit to becoming, you discover that life's richest rewards come not from what you have constructed, but from who you have allowed yourself to be. You must let go of your old self to step into your soul. This is one of the most challenging yet transformative truths in the journey of personal growth. The old self represents the identity you have built, your habits, beliefs, fears, and stories that have shaped how you see yourself and the world. It is the familiar framework that has carried you through life so far. But to truly awaken to your soul, to live authentically and deeply, you must be willing to release that worn-out identity. Only then can the fullness of your being emerge. The old self is comfortable because it is known. It is the collection of roles you play: the worker, the parent, the achiever, the survivor. It includes the conditioning from family, culture, and society, the ways you learn to protect yourself, and the narratives you repeat about who you are and what you deserve. These patterns become so ingrained that they feel like reality itself. Yet beneath these layers lies your soul, your deepest essence, your true nature, your inner compass. Letting go of the old self is not about abandoning responsibility or rejecting everything you've become. It's about recognizing what no longer serves your growth. It is about releasing the fears, limitations, and false identities that keep you trapped in cycles of pain or complacency. This process is often uncomfortable and sometimes painful because it asks you to face parts of yourself you may have ignored or denied. It challenges the safety of familiarity and calls you into the unknown. When you cling to the old self, you resist the soul's call. You may feel stuck in repetitive patterns, unfulfilled despite success, or disconnected despite relationships. The soul wants wholeness and authenticity, but the ego clings to control and predictability. The tension between these parts of you creates inner conflict. Growth occurs when you choose to surrender the old narratives and open space for the soul's truth to emerge. Stepping into your soul requires courage. It means embracing vulnerability, uncertainty, and impermanence. It means facing your fears without running, acknowledging your wounds without shame, and honoring your deepest desires without judgment. The soul is not a static destination, but a living, evolving presence within you. It calls you to live with more presence, compassion, and creativity. This transformation often feels like a death and rebirth. You must metaphorically die to the identities and beliefs that have defined you so that a more authentic self can be born. This is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. Each time you recognize an outdated belief or pattern and choose to release it, you deepen your connection to the soul. Letting go of your old self also means trusting that beyond the loss of familiar identity lies something greater, an expansive sense of being that is not limited by past experiences or societal expectations. It is the trust that the soul's guidance is wiser than the ego's fear. The journey from the old self to the soul is the essence of individuation, the psychological process Carl Jung described as becoming whole. It is a path toward integration where the conscious mind and the unconscious soul work together. Along this path, you reclaim parts of yourself that were lost, forgotten, or rejected, and you create a life aligned with your deepest truth. In essence, to step into your soul is to live fully and authentically, free from the chains of past conditioning. It is to embody the unique light that only you can shine in the world. But to reach this state, you must be willing to release the old self, because only in letting go can you truly become. Every symbol in a dream is a part of you calling for attention. Dreams are not random images or meaningless nonsense. They are messages from your unconscious mind, rich, complex, and deeply personal. Carl Jung believed that dreams communicate in the language of symbols, which are the psyche's way of expressing what the conscious mind cannot fully grasp or articulate. When you dream, Aspects of yourself that have been ignored, repressed, or overlooked emerge in symbolic form, inviting you to engage, understand, and integrate them. Unlike waking thoughts, dreams speak visually, metaphorically, and emotionally. A single image, a snake, a river, a house, a stranger, can carry layers of meaning. These symbols are not universal in their specifics, but deeply personal in their resonance. What a river symbolizes for one person, perhaps a flow of emotions or a boundary, might mean something different for another. Yet the common thread is that these images arise from within you. They are pieces of your psyche seeking recognition. Ignoring your dreams is like ignoring parts of yourself. Those symbols are like messengers knocking at the door, asking to be heard. They might be signaling unresolved conflicts, hidden desires, unacknowledged fears, or creative potential. When you pay attention, you begin to see your inner world reflected back in these symbols. A dream about falling might reveal a fear of failure or loss of control. A dream of flying might symbolize a yearning for freedom or transcendence. A house in disrepair could represent neglected parts of your identity. Dream symbols are bridges between the conscious and unconscious. They bring material from the depths to the surface, often in disguised form. Your conscious mind might reject or avoid certain feelings or truths during the day, but at night, the psyche finds a way to bring them into awareness. Dreams give voice to the silenced parts of you. They urge you to confront what you have hidden, denied, or feared. Engaging with dream symbols is not about deciphering a fixed code. It's about developing a dialogue with your inner world. Journaling your dreams, reflecting on recurring images, or discussing them with a trusted guide can help you unlock the messages. Over time, you build a personal language, a way to understand the unique symbols that your unconscious uses to communicate. This process fosters self-awareness and healing. When you listen to your dreams, you learn about the shadow parts of yourself, the qualities you reject or suppress. You discover aspects of your soul that seek expression and growth. The symbols may also point toward your potential, your calling, or the next steps in your life journey. They provide guidance, not commands. They invite exploration, not rigid interpretation. Ignoring these messages keeps you fragmented. You live unaware of important parts of your inner world, which can manifest as anxiety, confusion, or repeated life patterns. But when you honor the symbols, you begin to integrate those parts. Integration means wholeness, bringing the hidden into consciousness, reconciling opposites, and living more authentically. Ultimately, every symbol in your dream is a gift from your psyche, a call to pay attention, to listen, and to heal. It's an invitation to deepen your relationship with yourself and to awaken to the full richness of your inner life. When you embrace this dialogue, your dreams become not just nighttime stories, but sacred conversations with the soul. Your most despised qualities are the doorway to freedom. This may seem counterintuitive at first. Why would the traits you loathe within yourself hold the key to liberation? Yet Carl Jung illuminated this profound truth. The parts of yourself that you reject, judge, or fear often contain the energy and insight needed for genuine transformation. These despised qualities are usually aspects of your shadow, the unconscious parts of your personality that you have disowned because they conflict with your conscious identity or social conditioning. Most people spend a great deal of effort hiding, suppressing, or denying these traits. You may despise your anger, seeing it as destructive or shameful. You may reject your jealousy, labeling it as petty or ugly. You might be ashamed of your vulnerability, considering it weakness, or you might fear your ambition, worrying it makes you selfish or ruthless. Because these qualities feel dangerous or unacceptable, you push them away, trying to bury them deep within your psyche. But suppression does not erase. Instead, these rejected parts grow in power, often controlling your behavior from the shadows, causing inner conflict, self-sabotage, and repeating life patterns. The doorway to freedom opens when you stop fighting these despised qualities and instead turn toward them with curiosity and compassion. To confront your shadow is not to indulge its impulses blindly, but to recognize its messages and needs. For example, anger, when understood and expressed consciously, can become a powerful tool for setting boundaries and protecting yourself. Jealousy might reveal what you deeply desire or what you feel is missing in your life, pointing toward unmet needs that deserve attention. Vulnerability, once embraced, can open the way to authentic connection and emotional resilience. Ambition, when balanced with conscience, can drive meaningful achievement and purpose. This process of embracing your despised qualities is neither easy nor quick. It requires radical honesty and courage to look beneath your self-judgments and societal conditioning. It involves breaking down the black and white thinking that labels certain traits as bad and others as good. The shadow holds not just darkness, but also light, creativity, strength, passion, and authenticity that have been cut off in the name of conformity or fear. When you integrate these parts, you reclaim lost energy and wholeness. Integration leads to freedom because it ends the internal war. When you no longer reject a part of yourself, you don't need to defend against it. You stop projecting it onto others or acting it out unconsciously. Instead, you relate to yourself with understanding and ownership. This inner harmony frees you from repetitive cycles of shame, guilt, and self-sabotage that keep you stuck. Moreover, by embracing your despised qualities, you become less dependent on external validation. You no longer need others' approval to feel whole because you've made peace within. You gain emotional flexibility and resilience, able to face life's challenges without fragmenting. You also develop deeper empathy for others, recognizing the universal human struggle with shadow aspects. The path through the despised qualities is a journey toward authenticity. It invites you to reclaim your full humanity, not just the polished, acceptable parts, but the messy, complex, and contradictory. Freedom emerges not from perfection, but from embracing your true self, with all its light and shadow. In this way, what you once feared or hated within yourself transforms into a source of power and liberation. Your most despised qualities, once integrated, become the keys that unlock your soul's potential, leading you to a more authentic, free, and fulfilling life. True healing is integration, not denial. This principle lies at the heart of Carl Jung's psychological approach and offers a transformative lens through which to understand personal growth and emotional recovery. Too often, people confuse healing with simply pushing away pain, ignoring uncomfortable feelings, or pretending wounds don't exist. But healing is not about avoidance. It is about fully acknowledging all parts of yourself, the light and the dark, the strengths and the flaws, the joys and the sorrows, and bringing them into conscious awareness. This process of integration is the true path to wholeness. Denial might offer temporary relief, but it creates division within the psyche. When you deny a part of yourself, whether it's anger, grief, shame, or fear, you do not eliminate that experience. Instead, you bury it in the unconscious, where it gains power without your knowledge. These denied aspects don't vanish. They influence your behavior, your relationships, and your mental health in subtle and sometimes destructive ways. You may feel stuck in cycles of frustration, anxiety, or self-sabotage without understanding why. That's because the psyche strives for wholeness, and when parts of it are rejected, it signals distress through symptoms and conflicts. Integration means welcoming all parts of yourself, even the ones you dislike or fear. It means seeing your anger not just as rage to be controlled, but as a signal that your boundaries need respect. It means feeling your grief fully instead of numbing it, recognizing it as a necessary step toward healing loss. It means acknowledging shame, not to dwell in self-judgment, but to understand where you've been hurt and how you might reclaim your worth. Integration is a compassionate acceptance of your humanity in its entirety. This process is not easy. It requires courage to face uncomfortable truths and vulnerability to allow yourself to feel without defense. It demands honesty to recognize patterns and beliefs that no longer serve you. But in doing so, you dissolve the inner conflicts that fracture your sense of self. The tension between what you show the world and what you hide inside begins to lessen. The fragments of your psyche come together in dialogue rather than war. Healing through integration also means breaking free from the false dichotomy of good versus bad parts of self. Instead, you learn to see qualities as complex and multifaceted. The traits you once labeled as weaknesses may hold strengths when understood in context. The very emotions you feared as dangerous may be the source of creativity, connection, or resilience. When integrated, these parts enrich your experience rather than limit it. On a practical level, integration often involves bringing unconscious material into consciousness through reflection, therapy, dream analysis, or creative expression. These practices help you listen to the messages from the deeper self. When you bring light to shadow aspects, they lose their hold over you and become allies instead of enemies. Ultimately, true healing transforms your relationship with yourself. You move from fragmentation to wholeness, from avoidance to presence, from fear to acceptance. Integration liberates you from repeating old patterns because you are no longer driven by denied parts of your psyche. You become more grounded, resilient, and authentic. Denial only postpones suffering. Integration invites lasting transformation. Healing is not the absence of pain, but the presence of wholeness, and that can only happen when you embrace all that you are. The soul demands to be lived, not silenced. This profound statement captures a truth that resonates across cultures, religions, and spiritual traditions. Carl Jung, a pioneer in exploring the depths of the psyche, recognized that the soul is not a passive entity, but a living, breathing force within us. It is the core of our being, the essence that calls us toward meaning, creativity, connection, and authenticity. When the soul is silenced, stifled, or ignored, life loses its depth and vitality. The soul's call is persistent, insistent, and impossible to suppress indefinitely. Many people spend their lives trying to mute the voice of the soul. Social conditioning, fear, trauma, and practical demands often push the soul into the background. You may have been taught to prioritize logic over intuition, productivity over passion, conformity over individuality. You may have silenced your dreams because they seemed impractical or risky. Or you may have numbed your feelings because they were overwhelming or unsafe to express. This silencing creates a divide within you, a gap between the self you show to the world and the self that longs to be fully expressed. But the soul does not accept silence forever. It is restless. It calls through dreams, art, relationships, and moments of profound joy or sorrow. It speaks in symbols and metaphors that stir your imagination and intuition. It reveals itself in a sense of longing, dissatisfaction, or yearning for something more. The soul's language is subtle but powerful, urging you to live more deeply, more honestly, more fully. Ignoring the soul's demands can lead to a numbness or emptiness that no external success or distraction can fill. People who have silenced their souls often feel disconnected from themselves, from others, and from life itself. They may experience depression, anxiety, or a pervasive sense of meaninglessness. They go through the motions but feel a hollow ache inside. This is the soul's signal, a cry for recognition and release. Living the soul means listening to its call and responding with courage. It means prioritizing what nourishes your inner life, creativity, reflection, connection, and authenticity, over mere survival or societal approval. It means embracing your passions, even when they don't fit conventional molds. It means allowing yourself to be vulnerable, to feel deeply, and to express your truth. The soul invites you to live in alignment with your unique gifts and purpose. This process often requires dismantling old beliefs and roles that have kept the soul captive. It demands honesty about what truly matters to you beyond material success or external validation. It challenges you to step into uncertainty, to risk failure, and to face discomfort. But in doing so, you discover a richness of experience that transcends ordinary living. You connect with a deeper sense of meaning that sustains you through life's inevitable challenges. When you live the soul, your life becomes a work of art, a unique expression of your inner truth. You find joy not just in achievement, but in presence. You cultivate relationships that reflect your authenticity. You move through the world with a sense of purpose that is not imposed, but discovered. The soul's voice becomes your guide, your compass, and your sanctuary. In essence, the soul demands to be lived because it is life itself at its most profound level. Silencing it is silencing your own aliveness. Listening to it is awakening to the fullness of who you are. Meant to be. The soul is not a quiet whisper. It is the fire that ignites your journey. Without reflection, we become slaves to inherited patterns. This insight taps into a fundamental truth about human psychology and behavior. Much of what we do, think, and feel is shaped not by conscious choice, but by unconscious conditioning. These patterns come from our family, culture, upbringing, and collective history. They are passed down through generations like invisible scripts written before we were even born. Without the practice of reflection, these inherited habits and beliefs continue to run our lives unexamined, limiting our freedom and growth. Reflection is the conscious turning inward, a deliberate act of observing your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors with curiosity rather than judgment. It is the process of becoming aware of the unconscious forces that shape you. When you do not reflect, you act out inherited patterns automatically. For example, you may replicate family dynamics, relationship styles, or emotional reactions learned in childhood without realizing their origins. You might adopt beliefs about yourself, others, or the world that were never questioned, simply because they were handed down as truths. These inherited patterns often carry unresolved pain, trauma, or fear. When left unexamined, they manifest as repetitive struggles in life, conflict with others, self-sabotage, chronic dissatisfaction, or emotional reactivity. You might find yourself stuck in cycles of behavior that you cannot explain, wondering why you react a certain way or why you attract similar situations repeatedly. This is the psyche's way of trying to resolve what was never healed in the past. Reflection interrupts this cycle. It allows you to step back from your automatic responses and ask, where does this come from? What story am I telling myself? Which parts of this are truly mine, and which are inherited? Through reflection, you begin to see the patterns for what they are: scripts written by ancestors, cultural norms, or childhood experiences, not immutable truths. This awareness is the first step toward freedom because you can't change what you don't see. Moreover, reflection helps you reclaim agency. It empowers you to rewrite the scripts you've inherited. You gain the ability to choose which beliefs to keep, which behaviors to transform, and which narratives to release. You start living from conscious intention rather than unconscious compulsion. This is the essence of individuation, the process Carl Jung described as becoming your true self by integrating the unconscious with the conscious mind. Reflection also cultivates empathy and understanding. When you recognize that many of your reactions are echoes of past wounds or collective conditioning, you begin to treat yourself with more compassion. You see that your struggles are part of a larger human experience, not personal failings. This perspective softens self-judgment and opens the door to healing. Without reflection, inherited patterns remain invisible chains. They dictate your choices, influence your relationships, and limit your potential. But with reflection, those chains can be broken. You begin to move from being a passive product of your history to an active creator of your life. You no longer have to repeat the unconscious scripts handed down to you. Instead, you write your own story, one that honors your individuality and frees you from the shadows of the past. In practical terms, reflection can take many forms: journaling, meditation, therapy, honest conversations, or simply quiet moments of self-inquiry. The key is consistency and willingness to face uncomfortable truths. The rewards are profound: greater self-awareness, emotional freedom, and a life lived with authenticity rather than habit. Ultimately, reflection is the bridge between past and future, unconscious and conscious, limitation and liberation. Without it, we are bound by invisible forces. With it, we step into the light of choice and become architects of our own destiny. Transformation begins when the mask cracks. Throughout life, many of us wear masks, personas crafted to protect us, to help us fit in, to gain acceptance or power. These masks are the identities we present to the world, carefully constructed from social expectations, personal fears, and survival strategies. They help us navigate relationships, careers, and society at large. But beneath the surface, these masks can create distance between who we truly are and who we pretend to be. The moment the mask cracks, whether by circumstance, inner unrest, or confrontation, the possibility for deep transformation emerges. The mask is often necessary, especially in early life. It shields vulnerable parts of us from rejection or harm. It can take many forms: the perfectionist who hides insecurity behind achievement, the caretaker who sacrifices their needs for approval, the cynic who protects themselves through sarcasm, or the obedient child who suppresses desire to avoid conflict. These masks serve a purpose, but over time they can become prisons. They limit spontaneity, suppress authentic expression, and create internal tension because the true self is forced into the shadows. Transformation requires that the mask no longer holds. Sometimes the cracks come suddenly, a crisis, loss, or confrontation that exposes the gap between the mask and reality. Other times, the cracking is slow, a growing dissatisfaction, persistent anxiety, or a nagging feeling of inauthenticity. Regardless of the pace, the crack is essential. It lets light in. It breaks the illusion that the mask is the whole person, and it signals that the psyche is ready for change. When the mask cracks, the parts of yourself that have been hidden begin to surface. This can be frightening because it means facing vulnerabilities, fears, and flaws. You might feel exposed or uncertain. The ego resists because it fears losing control or approval. But the crack is also an invitation. It asks you to step beyond performance and meet yourself with honesty. It's the doorway to wholeness. True transformation is not about creating a new mask. It is about peeling away the old one. It is the process of integration, where the authentic self begins to reconcile with the persona. You learn to express parts of yourself that were previously denied or suppressed. You cultivate self-compassion for your imperfections and courage to reveal your true feelings and desires. This integration brings freedom because you are no longer divided against yourself. The cracked mask also changes your relationships. When you drop pretenses, you invite others to do the same. Connections deepen because they are based on authenticity rather than facade. People sense your genuineness and respond in kind. While vulnerability can feel risky, it often leads to greater intimacy and trust. This process is not linear or comfortable. The mask may crack multiple times before it falls away completely. You may retreat behind it again when fear arises. But each crack weakens its hold, and each moment of authenticity strengthens your connection to yourself and others. In essence, transformation begins at the fracture point where the mask no longer fits. It is a reminder that growth requires courage, the courage to be imperfect, to be seen, and to change. When the mask cracks, you are invited to awaken from illusion and step into your true self. This is the path to freedom, wholeness, and authentic living. The ego fights change, but the soul invites it. This statement captures the essential tension within the human psyche, a dynamic that plays out in moments of growth, crisis, and transformation. The ego is the conscious identity we build, a necessary structure that organizes our experience, provides a sense of self, and helps us navigate the external world. It thrives on stability, certainty, and control. Change threatens the ego because it disrupts these foundations. The soul, on the other hand, is the deeper essence of who we are, connected to purpose, meaning, and evolution. The soul beckons us toward growth, even when it is uncomfortable or uncertain. The ego's primary function is survival and coherence. It establishes routines, beliefs, and roles that feel safe and familiar. When faced with change, the ego instinctively resists. This resistance can manifest as fear, denial, avoidance, or rationalization. The ego fears losing control or identity. It prefers the known, even if flawed, over the unknown. This is why people often cling to unhealthy habits, toxic relationships, or outdated beliefs long past their usefulness. Change demands surrender, vulnerability, and risk, all things the ego finds threatening. Meanwhile, the soul operates from a different place. It is less concerned with immediate safety and more concerned with long-term wholeness. The soul understands that growth requires transformation. It invites you to shed what no longer serves your highest good and to step into new ways of being. This invitation often comes through discomfort, feelings of dissatisfaction, restlessness, or crisis that signal a need for change. The soul's voice is subtle but persistent. It calls you to deeper authenticity, creativity, and connection. The clash between ego and soul is the crucible of human development. When the soul invites change, the ego resists, creating internal conflict. You might feel torn between the desire for security and the yearning for meaning. This tension can be painful, manifesting as anxiety, depression, or confusion. Yet it is also fertile ground for transformation. The challenge is to listen beyond the ego's fear and hear the soul's call. Integrating this tension requires awareness and courage. First, you must recognize the ego's resistance as a natural defense mechanism, not as an enemy, but as a part of you trying to protect itself. Compassion toward the ego creates space for dialogue rather than war. Next, you cultivate trust in the soul's guidance, even when the path forward is unclear. This trust grows through practices like meditation, reflection, and openness to new experiences. Change invited by the soul is rarely sudden or dramatic. It often unfolds gradually through small shifts in perspective, behavior, and values. These shifts accumulate, leading to deeper alignment with your true self. Over time, the ego learns that change does not mean destruction, but renewal. It realizes that by surrendering control, it gains freedom. This dynamic also explains why personal growth can feel so challenging. Transformation demands that you release attachments to identity, comfort, and old stories. The ego fears this loss, but the soul knows it is necessary for expansion. When you move through this process, you emerge more whole, resilient, and authentic. In essence, the ego fights change because it fears death, the death of old identities and illusions. The soul invites change because it seeks life, the emergence of your fullest potential. The journey of growth is the dance between these two forces. When you learn to listen to your soul while honoring your ego, you navigate change with grace. You move beyond survival into thriving. and you become the fullest expression of who you were meant to be. The wound is where the healing begins. This powerful idea reflects one of the deepest truths of the human experience. Pain, suffering, and brokenness are often seen as purely negative, something to be avoided, fixed, or erased. But Carl Jung and many other spiritual and psychological traditions remind us that wounds are not just sources of suffering. They are also gateways to growth, transformation, and wholeness. The very place where you feel hurt or fragmented is often the place where healing has its roots. Wounds can take many forms. There are physical injuries, emotional traumas, psychological scars, and spiritual ruptures. Some wounds are obvious: a loss, betrayal, illness, or abuse. Others are subtle: chronic feelings of inadequacy, deep-seated fears, or persistent dissatisfaction. Regardless of their nature, wounds represent areas where the self has been injured, divided, or left vulnerable. They are the cracks in your armor, the openings through which pain enters. Yet, paradoxically, these cracks also allow light in. The wound exposes what has been hidden or denied. It calls attention to what you need to see about yourself and your life. It disrupts complacency and forces you to confront realities you might otherwise ignore. In this way, wounds act as messengers from the unconscious, signaling that something requires your awareness and care. Healing begins not by bypassing the wound, but by entering into relationship with it. This means allowing yourself to feel the pain fully, without judgment or avoidance. It means sitting with the discomfort long enough to understand its source and meaning. It means acknowledging the ways the wound has shaped your beliefs, behaviors, and patterns. When you turn toward the wound with curiosity and compassion, you begin the process of integration, bringing what was split off back into conscious awareness. The wound also holds the seed of transformation. Within the pain lies the potential for new strength, wisdom, and empathy. Many people who have experienced profound suffering report that their wounds became the foundation for greater compassion, creativity, and depth of character. The wound teaches humility, resilience, and connection. It dismantles illusions of control and perfection, inviting a more authentic engagement with life. Ignoring or denying the wound only prolongs suffering. When wounds are repressed, they manifest indirectly in anxiety, depression, addiction, or dysfunctional relationships. The psyche strives to heal, but without conscious attention, it resorts to symptoms and defenses. The wound becomes a silent dictator, controlling your life from the shadows. Healing is a courageous act because it requires vulnerability. It demands that you let go of the need to appear strong or whole and allow yourself to be seen as you truly are. It involves forgiveness, not necessarily of others, but often of yourself, for the ways you've been hurt or have hurt others. This forgiveness is not about excusing harm, but about releasing the hold that pain has on you. The process of healing through the wound is not linear. There will be setbacks, resistance, and moments of despair. But each time you return to the wound with openness, you deepen your capacity for healing. Over time, the wound loses its power to wound. Instead, it becomes a source of insight and vitality. In essence, the wound is not an end, but a beginning. It is the starting point of a journey from brokenness to wholeness, from suffering to wisdom. The path of healing is the path of embracing your full humanity, including the parts that hurt most. When you dare to meet your wound, you open the door to profound transformation and freedom. We don't find meaning, we remember it. This idea challenges the common assumption that meaning is something we must search for externally, as if it were hidden in distant places or future achievements. Instead, Carl Jung proposed that meaning is already within us, embedded deeply in the unconscious layers of the psyche, waiting to be recalled rather than discovered anew. It is not something to be invented, but something to be remembered, a rediscovery of the essence of who we are and why we are here. The notion that meaning is remembered points to the presence of a deeper, timeless wisdom inside each person. Our souls carry imprints of ancestral experiences, archetypes, and spiritual truths that transcend the immediate circumstances of our lives. These inner narratives have been carried through generations, encoded in symbols, myths, and instincts that guide us toward wholeness. When we feel lost or disconnected, it is often because we have forgotten this inner story, not because it has vanished. This remembering is a process of awakening. It is like returning home after being lost in a foreign land. The journey inward reveals layers of self and spirit that had been obscured by the noise of everyday life, cultural conditioning, and personal trauma. As we peel back these layers, fragments of meaning resurface, insights that resonate with a deep sense of truth. Dreams, synchronicities, creative inspiration, and moments of profound presence are all invitations to remember this hidden knowledge. Meaning is not abstract or theoretical, it is lived and felt. It shows up in the values you hold dear, the passions that stir your heart, and the connections that give your life depth. When you align with this remembered meaning, life gains coherence. Challenges no longer feel random, but part of a larger tapestry. Pain becomes a teacher, and purpose becomes clearer. This perspective also reframes the struggle for meaning. Rather than chasing external validation or accomplishments, the task is to cultivate awareness and receptivity to the inner world. Meditation, dream work, journaling, and therapy are tools that help you access this wellspring of remembered meaning. They slow you down and invite you to listen to the subtle voice of the soul. Remembering meaning requires humility and patience. It is not an instant revelation, but a gradual unfolding. Sometimes the meaning is hidden beneath layers of confusion, resistance, or denial. Other times it comes in flashes of clarity that transform your understanding. The more you engage in this inner work, the more your life feels guided by a sense of destiny rather than chance. Furthermore, remembering meaning connects you to the collective human story. Your personal journey is not isolated, but part of a vast network of shared experiences and archetypal themes. Recognizing this connection fosters a sense of belonging and continuity. It reminds you that you are both unique and part of something much greater. In essence, meaning is not lost to be found, it is dormant to be awakened. It resides within the depths of your being, woven into the fabric of your psyche and spirit. When you stop searching outward and begin to listen inward, you begin to remember who you truly are and why you are here. This remembering transforms life from a series of random events into a meaningful journey of becoming. Silence is the sacred space where the unconscious speaks. In the cacophony of modern life, filled with constant noise, distraction, and busyness, true silence has become rare and precious. Yet it is in this silence that the deepest parts of ourselves emerge. Carl Jung emphasized that the unconscious mind, which holds the vast reservoir of hidden thoughts, feelings, memories, and archetypes, communicates not through the clamor of everyday chatter, but through subtle, often silent signals. When you cultivate silence, you create the space for these messages to be heard. The unconscious is not a mere repository of forgotten information. It is a living, dynamic presence within us that influences our dreams, intuitions, emotions, and behaviors. But it operates beneath the threshold of conscious awareness. In the noise of distraction, whether from external stimuli or internal chatter, these unconscious voices are drowned out. The mind's constant activity keeps us locked in surface-level thinking, preventing the deeper wisdom from breaking through. Silence, then, is more than the absence of sound. It is a state of openness and receptivity. It is a pause where the usual dominance of the ego quiets down, allowing the unconscious to come forward. In this sacred stillness, symbols, images, and insights rise from the depths. Dreams become clearer, intuitions sharpen, and inner conflicts begin to untangle. It is a fertile ground for self-reflection, healing, and transformation. Many spiritual and psychological traditions recognize the power of silence. Meditation, prayer, solitude, and contemplative practices all emphasize creating space where the mind can settle. When you intentionally enter silence, you align yourself with a deeper rhythm, a pulse of life and meaning that transcends the noise of daily existence. In this space, the unconscious can reveal its messages not as literal words, but as feelings, images, or subtle knowing. This communication from the unconscious is often symbolic. It speaks in metaphors and archetypes that require attention and interpretation. Without silence, these messages remain faint or confusing. But in quiet moments, you can begin to decode the language of your inner world. You notice patterns in your dreams, sudden inspirations, or emotional responses that had previously seemed random. These clues guide you toward integration and wholeness. The sacredness of silence also lies in its capacity to connect you to something beyond yourself. In moments of deep silence, many experience a sense of unity with the cosmos, a connection to the collective unconscious Jung described. This expansive awareness can bring comfort, insight, and a sense of purpose. It reminds you that you are part of a larger whole, and that the answers you seek are both within and beyond your individual self. Creating silence in life is a practice. It requires discipline to turn off distractions, slow down, and resist the urge to fill every moment with activity. It may feel uncomfortable at first as the mind resists stillness and craves stimulation, but the more you cultivate this sacred silence, the more natural it becomes to listen deeply. Ultimately, silence is the gateway to inner wisdom. It is the sacred space where the unconscious speaks, not in loud declarations, but in whispers that call you to pay attention. When you honor this silence, you invite healing, clarity, and transformation into your life. You open yourself to the rich inner landscape that waits patiently for your presence. In that silence, you find not emptiness, but profound fullness. The path to wisdom begins with self-confrontation. This journey inward is not a gentle stroll, but a courageous encounter with the parts of yourself you may prefer to avoid. Carl Jung emphasized that wisdom is not simply about accumulating knowledge or external achievements. It is about deep self-awareness and the willingness to face your inner truths, both light and dark. Without this confrontation, growth remains superficial and true understanding elusive. Self-confrontation requires honesty. It demands that you look squarely at your fears, flaws, desires, and contradictions without denial or defense. Many people avoid this because it is uncomfortable to acknowledge the shadow aspects of themselves, the anger, jealousy, insecurity, or vulnerability that society often teaches us to hide. Yet, these parts are integral to who you are. To ignore them is to live fragmented, in conflict with yourself. This confrontation is not about self-criticism or harsh judgment. It is about acceptance and recognition. When you confront yourself, you begin to understand why you react certain ways, why patterns repeat, and what unconscious motivations drive your behavior. You move from being controlled by hidden forces to becoming aware of them. This awareness is the foundation of wisdom because it frees you from automatic responses and opens space for conscious choice. The process often begins with discomfort or crisis. You might encounter situations that shake your beliefs, challenge your identity, or reveal your limitations. These moments act as mirrors, reflecting aspects of yourself that require attention. Instead of fleeing or blaming external circumstances, self-confrontation invites you to take responsibility for your role in these experiences. This ownership is empowering and necessary for transformation. Through self-confrontation, you also begin to integrate your shadow, the disowned parts of yourself. Jung believed that the shadow holds both darkness and potential. When you bring it into consciousness, you reclaim lost energy and creativity. You become whole rather than divided. This integration enriches your character and deepens your empathy for others because you understand your own complexity. Wisdom gained through self-confrontation also cultivates humility. As you see your limitations and blind spots, you learn to let go of arrogance and embrace curiosity. You recognize that growth is a lifelong process and that no one is perfect. This humility opens you to learning from all experiences and from the perspectives of others. Moreover, confronting yourself fosters authenticity. When you stop hiding or pretending, you live more genuinely. This authenticity attracts deeper connections and aligns your life with your true values. You stop living to meet external expectations and start living in accordance with your inner truth. The path to wisdom through self-confrontation is not easy. It can bring pain, uncertainty, and vulnerability. But it is also a path of liberation. By facing yourself fully, you release illusions that limit you. You gain clarity about who you are and what matters most. You develop resilience to face life's challenges with grace. Practices such as journaling, meditation, therapy, and honest dialogue with trusted others can support this process. They create safe spaces to explore inner terrain and to witness your own experience without judgment. Over time, these moments of self-confrontation accumulate, forming a deeper foundation of self-knowledge. Ultimately, wisdom is born not from avoiding the uncomfortable, but from embracing it. Self-confrontation is the doorway through which you step from ignorance to insight, from fragmentation to wholeness. It is the courageous act that transforms knowledge into lived understanding and leads you toward a more meaningful, authentic life. Archetypes are inherited soul blueprints. This concept, deeply explored by Carl Jung, reveals that within each human being lies a shared reservoir of universal patterns and symbols that shape the way we experience life, understand ourselves, and relate to the world. These archetypes are not learned or acquired through personal experience. Rather, they are innate structures embedded within the collective unconscious, passed down through generations. They form the fundamental architecture of the human psyche, guiding our behaviors, emotions, and perceptions in profound ways. Think of archetypes as the primal templates of human existence. They represent essential themes and roles that have emerged over millennia of human evolution and cultural development. Some of the most recognized archetypes include the hero, the mother, the wise old man, the trickster, the shadow, and the anima, animus. Each archetype carries a set of attributes, motivations, and symbolic meanings that resonate across cultures and epochs, appearing in myths, fairy tales, religious stories, and dreams worldwide. The significance of archetypes lies in their power to shape personal and collective narratives. When you encounter a situation that triggers an archetypal pattern, you are engaging with something ancient and universal within you. For instance, the hero archetype surfaces when you face a challenge that requires courage and transformation, calling you to step beyond your comfort zone. The mother archetype embodies nurturing, protection, and creation, influencing how you care for others and seek care yourself. These inherited blueprints operate beneath conscious awareness, but influence conscious choices and emotional responses. Because archetypes are inherited, they connect you to the human story beyond your individual life. They explain why certain symbols and themes recur across different cultures and eras. A dragon, a journey to the underworld, a wise mentor. These motifs appear in countless stories because they reflect archetypal patterns ingrained in the human psyche. They serve as guides and metaphors for inner psychological processes and life's universal experiences. Engaging with archetypes is a pathway to deeper self-understanding and growth. By recognizing which archetypal energies are active in your life, you can begin to see your behaviors, motivations, and conflicts with greater clarity. For example, if you find yourself repeatedly drawn to roles of the victim or the warrior, exploring these archetypes can reveal unconscious dynamics that either empower or limit you. This awareness allows you to consciously work with these forces, integrating them into a more balanced and authentic self. Archetypes also play a crucial role in creativity and spirituality. They provide a rich symbolic language that artists, poets, and mystics tap into to express universal human experiences. By accessing archetypal images and stories, you connect with something larger than yourself, a collective wisdom that transcends time and culture. Understanding that archetypes are inherited soul blueprints challenges the notion that our personalities are solely shaped by environment or personal choice. It invites a broader perspective that acknowledges the deep shared structures within all humans. This awareness fosters compassion as you recognize that many struggles, desires, and fears are not unique personal failures, but expressions of universal patterns. Moreover, working with archetypes can facilitate healing. Unintegrated archetypal energies may manifest as inner turmoil or behavioral extremes. For example, an unacknowledged shadow archetype, the parts of yourself you deny or repress, can cause destructive projections onto others. Bringing such archetypes into conscious awareness through reflection, dream analysis, or therapy enables integration and greater psychological wholeness. In essence, archetypes as inherited soul blueprints connect you to the timeless collective dimensions of your being. They are the scaffolding upon which your individual experience is built, guiding your journey toward self-realization. By learning to recognize and embrace these archetypal patterns, you open the door to profound insight, healing, and connection with the universal human spirit. You are part myth, part memory, part mystery. This poetic insight captures the profound complexity of human identity and experience, reminding us that who we are cannot be fully understood through simple definitions or surface-level observations. Instead, each person embodies layers that stretch beyond the immediate and the tangible, layers woven from ancient stories, personal histories, and the unknown depths of the psyche. The myth aspect refers to the archetypal stories and symbols embedded within you. Myths are not just old tales. They are the language of the soul. Across cultures and ages, certain motifs repeat: heroes embarking on quests, wise guides appearing in times of need, battles between light and shadow, journeys of transformation and rebirth. These myths live within the collective unconscious, a vast psychic inheritance shared by all humanity. When you feel drawn to certain stories or symbols, or when you experience emotions and situations that seem larger than life, you are connecting to these mythic currents flowing through your being. Your life, in a sense, participates in these timeless dramas, giving your personal experiences a universal resonance. The memory component reflects the personal and collective past that shapes you. Your individual memories, childhood experiences, relationships, successes, traumas, form the narrative thread of your unique life story. These memories influence your beliefs, emotions, and behaviors. They are the foundation upon which your sense of self is built. But beyond personal memory lies collective memory, the inherited patterns, cultural values, and ancestral experiences passed down through generations. These memories influence you in ways often unconscious yet deeply powerful. They shape how you relate to family, community, and even the world at large. The interplay of myth and memory creates a rich tapestry of identity, but the third part, mystery, reminds us that not everything about ourselves can be known or explained. The mystery is the space beyond understanding, the depths of the unconscious, the ineffable aspects of the soul. It is the unknown territory where potential, intuition, and spirit reside. Mystery invites humility because it acknowledges that no matter how much we learn or experience, there remains an uncharted realm within us. It is the source of creativity, dreams, and transcendence. It keeps us open to wonder and transformation. Recognizing that you are part myth, part memory, part mystery expands your view of self beyond the confines of ego and everyday identity. It invites you to explore not just who you think you are, but who you have always been at a deeper archetypal level. It encourages you to honor your personal story while connecting it to the broader human experience. It calls you to embrace the unknown within you with curiosity rather than fear. Living with this awareness also brings integration. You begin to see how your personal struggles and triumphs are reflections of larger mythic themes. You understand that your memories carry wisdom and wounds from the past, both your own and those of your ancestors, and you learn to trust the mystery, that inner guidance, and the unknown paths that unfold in life. This holistic understanding fosters compassion for yourself and others. When you realize that everyone carries mythic patterns, collective memories, and mysterious depths, it becomes easier to forgive faults and embrace complexity. It dissolves simplistic judgments and opens space for connection on a soul level. In essence, being part myth, part memory, part mystery means you are a living story, rooted in history, connected to timeless truths, and unfolding into unknown possibilities. This is the essence of human existence, a dynamic interplay between the known and the unknown, the personal and the universal. Embracing this truth leads to a richer, deeper experience of life and self. The symbols in your life are not random, they are guides. This principle lies at the heart of Carl Jung's exploration of the unconscious mind and offers a profound way to understand the subtle language through which your inner world communicates. Symbols appear everywhere, in dreams, art, conversations, recurring numbers, or seemingly coincidental events. Rather than being mere accidents or meaningless images, these symbols serve as signposts, guiding you toward deeper self-awareness, growth, and transformation. Symbols are the language of the unconscious. Unlike the rational, linear way your conscious mind processes information, the unconscious speaks through metaphor, image, and emotion. When a symbol surfaces, whether in a dream of a winding river, a chance encounter with a stranger, or an unexpected song playing at a poignant moment, it carries layers of meaning that your waking mind might initially miss. These meanings are not fixed, but personal, rooted in your unique life experience, cultural background, and inner psyche. Understanding symbols as guides invites you to pay closer attention to the messages hidden in your everyday life. When you notice recurring symbols, it is often the psyche's way of highlighting important themes or challenges. For example, dreaming repeatedly about a house might symbolize your sense of self or your inner stability. Seeing birds might represent freedom or spiritual aspiration. The exact meaning emerges from reflecting on what those symbols evoke in you personally. Symbols also point toward wholeness and integration. They often represent parts of yourself that have been neglected or repressed. The shadow, or the unconscious parts you disown, frequently appears symbolically, urging you to bring those aspects into conscious awareness. For example, encountering a dark forest in a dream might symbolize unexplored fears or unresolved issues. Engaging with these symbols consciously allows you to heal fragmentation within yourself and move toward greater psychological balance. In waking life, symbols can also appear as synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that feel too significant to be random. These moments often arrive when you are at a crossroads, facing a decision, or searching for direction. The symbol's appearance is like a nudge from your deeper self or the collective unconscious, encouraging you to pay attention, reconsider, or take a new path. Recognizing synchronicity as symbolic guidance helps cultivate trust in the unfolding of your life. Working with symbols requires openness and curiosity. It is less about rigid interpretation and more about dialogue. Reflective practices such as journaling, dream analysis, meditation, or creative expression can help you explore what a symbol means for you. Asking questions like, "What feelings does this symbol evoke?" or "Where else do I see this image in my life?" can deepen your understanding. Symbols also enrich your experience of spirituality and creativity. They connect you to universal patterns and archetypes that transcend individual experience. When you engage with symbols, you tap into a larger network of meaning shared across cultures and history. This connection offers comfort and insight, reminding you that your personal journey is part of a greater human story. Ignoring symbols means missing valuable guidance. When you dismiss or overlook symbolic messages, the psyche often becomes insistent, bringing the symbol back in more intense or troubling ways until it is acknowledged. This persistence underscores the importance of paying attention. Ultimately, symbols are sacred messengers from within. They lead you from confusion to clarity, from fragmentation to integration, from unconsciousness to consciousness. By learning to recognize and honor the symbols in your life, you invite a richer, more meaningful dialogue with yourself and the world. You transform random moments into a tapestry of insight and growth. The symbols are not just images. They are your inner guides, lighting the path to wholeness. Your inner child doesn't need fixing. It needs recognition. This simple yet profound insight shifts the way we approach healing and self-understanding. Often, when people hear about the inner child, they imagine a fragile, broken version of themselves that must be repaired or corrected. Therapy, self-help, and popular culture frequently emphasize fixing the wounds of childhood, erasing pain, eliminating dysfunction, or becoming better. But the true work lies not in fixing, but in seeing, honoring, and embracing that inner child with compassion. The inner child represents the part of you that holds your earliest experiences, emotions, and memories. It is the seat of your vulnerability, innocence, wonder, and creativity, but also the repository of your wounds, fears, and unmet needs. This part of yourself often feels neglected or silenced, especially if you experience trauma, neglect, or invalidation during your formative years. However, the inner child is not a problem to be solved. It is a living, feeling part of your psyche, calling out for acknowledgement. When the inner child is denied or ignored, it doesn't disappear. Instead, it expresses itself through behaviors, emotions, and patterns that can seem confusing or self-sabotaging. You might find yourself reacting with unexpected fear, anger, or sadness that seems disproportionate to the present situation. You might struggle with intimacy or self-worth. These reactions are often the inner child's way of communicating distress, seeking comfort, or protecting itself. Recognition is the first step toward healing because it breaks the cycle of neglect. To recognize your inner child means to listen without judgment to those hidden parts of yourself. It means acknowledging your pain, fears, and desires as real and valid, no matter how old you are now. Recognition creates safety within the psyche, allowing those vulnerable parts to emerge from hiding. When you meet your inner child with kindness, you offer the validation and love that may have been missing before. This recognition transforms the relationship you have with yourself. Instead of fighting or denying your wounded parts, you create a dialogue. You learn to comfort rather than criticize. You become a reliable caretaker for your own inner world. This nurturance fosters integration, allowing the inner child to become a source of strength rather than a source of pain. Moreover, the inner child holds your capacity for joy, creativity, and spontaneity. When recognized, it reconnects you to the playfulness and wonder that often get lost in adulthood. It invites you to explore life with curiosity and openness. This reconnection enriches your emotional life and deepens your sense of authenticity. Recognition also paves the way for forgiveness. Often the inner child carries blame toward parents, caregivers, or even oneself. Seeing the inner child compassionately helps dissolve resentment and shame. You realize that the wounds of childhood were not your fault, and that you deserve healing regardless of the past. Healing through recognition is a gentle but powerful process. It may involve inner dialogue, visualization, creative expression, or revisiting memories with a new perspective. It is not about erasing the past, but about integrating it into your present self with acceptance. Ultimately, your inner child's need for recognition is a call to wholeness. It invites you to embrace all parts of yourself, the joyful, the wounded, the playful, and the scared. By answering this call, you reclaim your innate worth and open the door to profound emotional healing and growth. The inner child is not broken. It is waiting to be seen, heard, and loved. When you recognize this, you step into a fuller, more compassionate relationship with yourself. The wise old man and the wounded child live side by side in you. This poignant metaphor, rooted in Carl Jung's exploration of archetypes, reveals the deep complexity within each human being. Our inner world is not a singular, simple entity, but a rich landscape where contrasting forces coexist, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in tension. The wise old man symbolizes wisdom, guidance, and maturity, while the wounded child represents vulnerability, innocence, and unhealed pain. Both dwell within us simultaneously, shaping our experience of life, our choices, and our capacity for growth. The wise old man archetype embodies the qualities of insight, reflection, and understanding gained through life's trials. This inner figure carries the voice of experience, offering counsel, patience, and perspective when life feels overwhelming. The wise old man helps us see beyond immediate challenges, connecting us to deeper truths and timeless wisdom. He encourages us to embrace complexity and ambiguity rather than seeking simplistic answers. His presence is calming, grounding, and empowering, guiding us through transformation with steady hands. In contrast, the wounded child archetype holds the emotional core of our earliest experiences, the joys and traumas that have shaped our sense of self. This child is often tender, fragile, and sometimes frightened, carrying wounds from neglect, rejection, or loss. The wounded child's pain is raw and immediate, demanding attention and care. Ignoring or suppressing this inner child can lead to unresolved grief, emotional reactivity, and patterns of self-sabotage. The wounded child reminds us of the humanity within us, the parts that need healing, validation, and love. Living with both these archetypes side by side is the human condition. The wise old man does not dismiss the wounded child, but acknowledges and embraces it. He understands that wisdom is not the absence of pain, but the integration of pain into a larger narrative of growth. This integration is essential for psychological wholeness. When the wise old man holds the wounded child with compassion, healing becomes possible. The child feels seen and safe, while the wisdom is deepened by empathy. This internal relationship also reflects a broader dynamic in life. We often struggle to reconcile our desires for strength and independence with our needs for tenderness and support. The wise old man urges maturity and responsibility, while the wounded child calls for nurturing and protection. Balancing these parts is a lifelong process. Overemphasizing one at the expense of the other leads to imbalance, either harsh self-discipline without self-care or helplessness without empowerment. Recognizing these archetypes within yourself encourages self-compassion and patience. You learn to listen to the wounded child's fears and needs without judgment, and to invite the wise old man's guidance without arrogance. This dialogue fosters resilience because it honors both vulnerability and strength. It allows you to navigate life's complexities with authenticity rather than repression or denial. Practically engaging with these archetypes might involve reflective practices such as journaling, meditation, or therapy. You might visualize conversations between the wise old man and the wounded child, or notice how different feelings and impulses relate to each archetype. These practices deepen self-awareness and facilitate healing by bringing unconscious dynamics into conscious understanding. Ultimately, the coexistence of the wise old man and the wounded child within you is a reminder that you are both fragile and strong, broken and whole, innocent and wise. Embracing this inner duality enriches your experience of yourself and others. It opens the way to profound healing, growth, and the embodiment of true wisdom, a wisdom born not from perfection, but from the tender acknowledgement of your full humanity. Every should is a clue to who you are not. This deceptively simple statement invites deep reflection on the origins of our inner demands and judgments. The word should often appears in our inner dialogue as a command, a voice telling us what we must do, how we must behave, or who we must become. It carries an implicit sense of obligation and often guilt, implying that there is a correct way to be or act. But beneath every should lies a shadow, an indication of parts of yourself that you have disowned, rejected, or denied. Understanding this relationship opens a pathway toward greater authenticity and freedom. When you catch yourself saying, "I should be more successful," "I should be nicer," or "I shouldn't feel this way," you are not simply setting goals or expressing values. You are revealing an internal conflict, a tension between your true self and an imposed ideal. This ideal is often constructed from external expectations, cultural norms, family conditioning, societal pressures, or internalized voices from authority figures. It represents who you are trying to be rather than who you actually are. The shoulds create a map of your unconscious self-rejection. They point toward qualities, emotions, or desires that you have labeled as unacceptable or inappropriate. For example, if you frequently say, "I should not be angry," it suggests that anger is a part of you have not accepted. If you tell yourself, "I should always be strong," it might mean that vulnerability has been denied or feared. These shoulds are signposts indicating where you are out of alignment with your authentic nature. This dynamic can lead to inner fragmentation. The more you force yourself to live according to shoulds, the more you suppress your genuine feelings, impulses, and needs. You create a persona that fits expectations but hides parts of your psyche. This suppression often results in psychological tension, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion because you are essentially living a divided life, one part trying to conform, the other yearning for expression. Recognizing shoulds as clues rather than commands is a radical shift. Instead of seeing them as rigid rules, you can view them as invitations to explore what has been disowned. Each should asks you to ask, who am I resisting? What part of myself am I denying? This inquiry opens a door to self-compassion and curiosity. It allows you to discover qualities that have been buried under layers of conditioning and fear. This process is not about abandoning all standards or values. It's about distinguishing between authentic desires and imposed ideals. Authenticity involves aligning with your true nature, which may sometimes conflict with external shoulds. For example, you may realize that your path to fulfillment does not match society's definition of success, or that your way of expressing kindness is different from what you were taught. Honoring this truth leads to greater freedom and integrity. The liberation that comes from this awareness also improves relationships. When you stop living according to external shoulds, you become more genuine with others. You communicate your true feelings and boundaries, fostering deeper connections. You also become less judgmental toward yourself and others, recognizing that everyone carries their own set of internal shoulds and shadows. In practical terms, working with shoulds involves mindfulness and reflection. Notice when the word should arises in your thoughts or speech. Pause and explore what it reveals about your inner world. Journaling or therapy can help uncover the roots of these shoulds and guide you toward integration. Ultimately, every should is a map pointing away from authenticity and toward shadow. When you follow the clues, you find parts of yourself waiting to be embraced. By doing so, you move from self-imposed limitation to self-acceptance. You transform should from a source of guilt and conflict into a guide for self-discovery and wholeness. You cannot serve two masters, the soul and the mask. This timeless wisdom speaks to the fundamental conflict many people experience between their authentic self and the persona they present to the world. The mask is the carefully constructed identity shaped by social expectations, roles, and the desire for approval. It is the face we wear to fit in, succeed, or protect ourselves. The soul, on the other hand, represents the deeper, truer essence of who we are, the source of meaning, creativity, and connection. Attempting to serve both simultaneously creates tension, fragmentation, and inner conflict because they demand opposing loyalties. The mask is necessary in many ways. It helps us navigate society, manage relationships, and fulfill responsibilities. It acts as a protective barrier against vulnerability, rejection, and judgment. When you present a polished, agreeable version of yourself, you gain acceptance and often safety. The mask is a social tool learned from childhood, influenced by culture, family, and experience. It provides structure and predictability, but it is inherently limited because it is shaped by external demands rather than internal truth. The soul, however, calls for authenticity and wholeness. It is the voice that urges you to be real, to embrace your complexities, contradictions, and deepest desires. The soul's call is often subtle, expressed through intuition, dreams, creative urges, or a persistent feeling that something essential is missing. It asks you to live in alignment with your values and to express your true self, even if that means discomfort or risk. Serving the soul means prioritizing inner truth over external approval and meaning over mere appearance. When you try to serve both the soul and the mask, you enter a state of division. The mask demands conformity and control. The soul demands freedom and authenticity. This division creates stress and exhaustion because you are constantly negotiating between who you really are and who you think you should be. You may feel like you're acting in a play, always performing, while your inner self is silenced or sidelined. Over time, this can lead to feelings of emptiness, anxiety, or depression as the soul's needs remain unmet. The tension between these two masters can also manifest in relationships and life choices. You might choose paths that look impressive but feel hollow, or stay in roles that bring security but stifle your growth. You may find yourself pleasing others while neglecting your own needs. The mask demands safety and acceptance, while the soul calls for courage and authenticity. To serve one fully, you must release the hold of the other. Serving the soul requires the bravery to let the mask fall away. It means embracing vulnerability and imperfection. It means acknowledging fears of rejection and still choosing to express your truth. This does not imply abandoning social responsibility or becoming reckless. Instead, it means integrating your external roles with your inner self, allowing your life to be a genuine expression of your soul's essence. This integration is a lifelong process. The mask is not discarded overnight, nor is the soul's voice always loud or clear. But the more you listen to your soul and act from authenticity, the less you feel trapped by external expectations. You develop resilience to criticism and the confidence to live on your own terms. The mask becomes a flexible tool rather than a fixed identity, and the soul guides your choices. Ultimately, the impossibility of serving both masters simultaneously teaches a vital lesson about integrity. You must choose allegiance, to the deeper self or to the false self. True freedom and fulfillment arise when you align with the soul, allowing it to inform how you wear your mask rather than be overshadowed by it. In this alignment, you live fully, not as a facade, but as the unique, whole person you were always meant to be. Fate is passive. Destiny is conscious collaboration. This distinction illuminates two fundamentally different ways of relating to life's unfolding journey. Fate suggests a predetermined path, an unchangeable series of events that happen to you without your input or choice. It implies passivity, resignation, and the sense that life is something outside your control. Destiny, on the other hand, invites active participation. It suggests that while certain potentials or callings may exist within you, realizing them requires awareness, intention, and engagement. Destiny is a dance between what is given and what you choose to create. The concept of fate can feel both comforting and limiting. On one hand, believing in fate can relieve anxiety by providing a sense of order or purpose. This is meant to be. But on the other hand, it can lead to passivity, discouraging you from taking responsibility for your actions or from striving to change your circumstances. When you see life as fate, you may wait for things to happen to you rather than making things happen. Destiny, by contrast, acknowledges that while there are aspects of life beyond your control, you are not powerless. It invites you to collaborate consciously with the currents of your existence. This collaboration requires self-awareness, the ability to recognize your strengths, weaknesses, desires, and fears. It requires discernment, to see opportunities and make choices aligned with your deeper purpose. Destiny is not about blindly following a script, but about co-creating your story with intention. In this sense, destiny is a partnership between the individual and the greater forces at play, whether you conceive these forces as fate, divine will, or the unconscious. Jung described destiny as a calling from the self, an inner summons toward individuation and wholeness. The seeds of your destiny may be planted by birth or circumstance, but their fruition depends on your conscious engagement. Destiny asks you to step up, to respond, and to bring your unique gifts into the world. Viewing life through the lens of destiny transforms challenges into invitations. Obstacles and setbacks are not just misfortunes imposed by fate, but lessons or turning points calling for your participation. You move from being a victim of circumstance to an active agent in your growth. This perspective fosters resilience, creativity, and empowerment. Moreover, destiny involves alignment. It is about harmonizing your personal will with larger rhythms, those of your inner self, community, and the world. When you act in accordance with your destiny, your efforts flow more effortlessly because they resonate with these greater forces. It feels like a meaningful unfolding rather than a random struggle. Conscious collaboration with destiny also means embracing uncertainty. Unlike fate, which implies certainty and fixity, destiny acknowledges the unknown and invites exploration. You cannot know every step in advance, but you trust the process, remaining open to guidance and change. This openness is a form of wisdom, recognizing that control is limited and surrender is necessary. Practically, engaging with destiny involves cultivating self-reflection, listening to intuition, and making deliberate choices. It means setting intentions while remaining flexible. It requires courage to face fears and to step into the unknown. It also calls for patience, as destiny unfolds over time rather than in instant results. Ultimately, the difference between fate and destiny lies in your relationship to life. Fate is something that happens to you. Destiny is something you actively participate in. Embracing destiny means waking up to your role as co-creator of your life's path. It invites you to move beyond passivity into purposeful action, shaping a life that reflects both the mystery of existence and the power of your conscious will. Your life is a dialogue between your ego and your unconscious. This relationship forms the core of your psychological experience and shapes the way you perceive, react, and grow. The ego is the conscious part of you, the I that navigates daily life, makes decisions, and interacts with the world. It is essential for survival and functioning, organizing your thoughts, feelings, and actions. The unconscious, on the other hand, is the vast reservoir beneath awareness, containing repressed memories, desires, fears, and archetypal energies. It is not a silent void, but a dynamic, living presence that influences your behavior, dreams, and inner life. Understanding your life as a dialogue between these two realms opens the door to deeper self-awareness and integration. The ego often sees itself as the captain of the ship, steering through clear waters with confidence and control. Yet it is only a small part of the whole psyche. Beneath the surface, the unconscious shapes currents and tides that the ego must learn to navigate. These unconscious forces can appear as sudden emotions, dreams filled with symbolism, or impulses that feel out of control. Because the ego operates on logic and conscious reasoning, it can find these unconscious messages confusing or threatening. The unconscious is rich in symbolism and metaphor, speaking a language very different from the ego's literal thinking. This creates a natural tension, a push and pull between ego and unconscious. The ego strives for order, predictability, and safety. It wants to maintain the image of a stable, coherent self. The unconscious, however, contains not only forgotten or suppressed material, but also the potential for growth, creativity, and transformation. It challenges the ego's limited perspective by bringing up what is hidden, unresolved, or undeveloped. This tension is the engine of psychological development. When the ego ignores or suppresses the unconscious, problems arise. Unconscious content does not disappear. It manifests indirectly through symptoms, compulsions, projections, or repetitive life patterns. For example, someone who denies anger might find themselves erupting unexpectedly or attracting relationships filled with conflict. The unconscious speaks through these expressions, demanding attention and integration. Without dialogue, the ego remains unaware of these inner forces, and suffering often persists. Conversely, when the ego listens and engages with the unconscious, a profound dialogue unfolds. Dreams become messages rather than mysteries. Emotional responses gain meaning. Inner conflicts reveal paths to wholeness. The ego learns to translate symbolic language and integrate unconscious wisdom into conscious life. This dialogue fosters individuation, the process Jung described as becoming the fullest version of yourself by harmonizing conscious and unconscious elements. This inner conversation requires patience and humility. The ego must relinquish the illusion of complete control and embrace uncertainty. The unconscious requires trust and openness to reveal its guidance. Practices like dream journaling, meditation, therapy, or creative expression facilitate this dialogue by providing safe spaces for unconscious material to emerge and be explored consciously. Importantly, this dialogue is not a battle, but a partnership. The ego is not the enemy of the unconscious, nor is the unconscious an enemy to the ego. Together, they create balance. The ego provides structure and awareness. The unconscious provides depth and vitality. When they work in harmony, you live more authentically, respond to life's challenges with greater wisdom, and experience a richer inner world. Your life's unfolding is shaped by how well you can maintain this dialogue. Ignoring either side leads to imbalance, rigidity or chaos, denial or overwhelm. Engaging both fosters growth, healing, and a deeper connection with your true self. Understanding life as a conversation between ego and unconscious invites you to become a skilled listener and mediator within your own psyche, opening the door to profound transformation and wholeness.